In this tutorial, you will learn how to make double jump, parallax effect, Cinemachine camera, camera shake, basically about Cinemachine camera and camera shake when enemy takes damage, projectile spawn, explosion effect, and much more in details for beginners and intermediate people. This is part 2 of Unity 6 and C# 4 tutorial, basically for absolute beginners. If you haven't watched the first tutorial, then check it. I will have the link in the description. Also, I want to thanks for supporting me on Patreon, Gil Harme Damasino and Noah Sely. If you guys want to support me, then you can do it on Patreon. And also, if you are looking for amazing courses on Unity 6 and C Sharp, then I highly recommend my courses. You can check all of them in the description. There will be no ads interruption and split it individually. Also, you will get some assignments at the end of the course. So now let's dive into this full tutorial. Instead of making single jump, we're gonna make double jump. So for that, we will change our code. Let's select our player game object in the hierarchy and let's open up the player script by double clicking on it, and we need to change something. So we calling the jump right over here. As you can see, this is our jump function, and we calling once we press down space key, at the same time we standing on the ground. If that is the case, then we calling the jump function. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove this is ground from here. I'm gonna remove this, and instead over here we will check with some other condition. But before we do, we already created a is ground parameter, as you can see. So what we will do, we're gonna check if this basically what we really want to do. We want to create a circle, create a circle of feet of this player game object somewhere around here. And if that circle collide with this ground, then we will make our jump basically double jump. We will create another two variables in order to keep track of our jump. So we will create a circle around bottom of this player game object. So let's do it. For that, let's open up our player script by double clicking on it, and let's go to somewhere around here, and let's suppose you just want to give it a title underneath your player schemes with a nice title or header. Then you can use this. It's called header. So you need to make these square brackets first, then header, and then you need to make these brackets, and in quotation you need to put the title that you really want to give. So I'm gonna say something like ground detection, ground detection, detection, like that. And now we're gonna create our circle. To create our circle, basically we need a point from where we want to create the circle. So we need point or position, as well we also need our radius of that circle. And the third argument, we need our layer mask, basically which game object we want to target. So in our case, we're gonna target this ground only. So let's move over to our script, and I'm gonna move this is ground and this jump height parameter underneath my this over right over here. So I'm gonna select those variable like this and hold down alt on your keyboard and use up and down arrow key in order to move. As you can see, I'm doing like this. So what we need a point from where we want to create the circle. So let's make a public, but instead of making public, we're gonna make serialized field. Basically, if we type private and we're looking for position, so we're gonna type this transform, which is responsible for position, rotation, and scale. And we can call this something like ground checkpoint. So let's call it ground ground checkpoint, and let's close that up with semicolon. But as you can see, we just made it private, so we're not gonna able to see underneath our player scape. But how we can able to make this public even this field is private? So in order to make this public, you can make these square brackets, and inside these square brackets you basically have to type this serialized field. And now, even though it's private field, now we will still able to see underneath our player scape. Why? Because we mark this serialized field. But the problem is that we're not gonna able to access this parameter from another class or you can simply say from another script. So that is the thing, but making like this makes our code lot more clean, so that's why we basically have to go with this. It's just makes our code clean, you can simply say. And now we're going to make another serialized field that will also be private. Even though it's private, we still gonna able to see underneath our player skip in the inspector. And we need what we need, the radius. So we can create a float and we can call this one check radius. So let's call it check radius, and by default I'm gonna give something around 0.25 sorry 0.2 f unit. And fourth argument we need third argument we need the layer mask. So we will create serialized field private layer mask, basically which game object we want to target, and we're gonna call this one target layer, or we can simply call this one what is, let's call it what is ground, and let's close that up with semicolon. And we're gonna press down Ctrl S on our keyboard in order to save. But I'm gonna do the same thing with this parameter, which is jam height. So firstly I'm gonna make this one private. So we made it private, so we're not gonna able to see underneath our player skip right over here, but we just want to see, then we just need to mark this as a serialized field. So we're gonna type this serialized field, and I'm gonna move this parameter, which is ground. It's just gonna keep track of if we standing on this ground or not, basically top of this ground or not. So I'm gonna move this line of code. So I'm gonna select first, and let's hold down Alt on our keyboard, and let's use up and down arrow key in order to move it up and down. And now I'm gonna press down Ctrl S one more time to save my script, and let's move over to Unity. So underneath our ground detection title, as you can see, a header or the title just pop up underneath our player skip, which is ground detection, and we still able to see this ground check radius, what is ground, even though we just made those field private, but we do know that we just marked as serialized field, so that's why we able to need notice underneath our player skip. So ground checkpoint, as you can see, it says none transform, basically empty. So let's create a point bottom of this, or you can simply say feet of this player game object, and from that point we just gonna create the circle. So we will select our player game object in the hierarchy. Let's right click on it, let's create an empty game object, and we're gonna call this game object to something like ground checkpoint. And I'm gonna select this move tool from here, and let's move it somewhere around here, and let's go over to inspector, and we're gonna choose and gizmos for it. So this is our ground checkpoint, and let's select our ground checkpoint. Let's drag it over to this ground checkpoint field, and check radius by default we have given 0.2, and what is ground, it says nothing, so we're gonna choose our ground. But before you choose your ground, make sure you assign this ground or tile or this ground as a ground layer. So how you can do that? So firstly you need to select your ground tile or this ground game object. So in my case I will move over to my create and then this ground tile, and then move over to inspector. In the top right you can see layer, and it will be default, so just click there and then click on add layer, then name the layer what you want. I already name it, as you can see, and then hit enter in order to save, and make sure you select that game object one more time, so in your case that ground, and assign with the layer which is I already assigned with this ground. So move over to inspector and layer, choose the layer that you recently created. Now once we done, we can just move over to our player skip, and what is ground, I'm gonna choose my ground, so that circle just only gonna check with this ground. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna open up our player skip because we need to create that circle, and in order to create that we will move over to our this update function. So this update function get called every single frame, so every single frame we're gonna check. So let's do it somewhere around here, and what we will do, to create the circle we need to use this physics 2d, sorry, it's not gonna be physics, it's gonna be physics 2d, physics 2d dot overlap circle, and the first thing it's gonna take the point, so we will pass our ground checkpoint and we need to access the position, so we're gonna type this dot position. And the second thing, it's gonna take the radius, so we will pass our check radius. And the third argument, it's gonna take the layer mask, so we will pass our what is ground, and we do know what is ground, we have chosen that ground. So this physics 2D dot overlap circle, it's just gonna create the circle around ground check position with this much of radius, and it's gonna target our ground. So it's gonna create the circle somewhere around here. And let's suppose the circle really collide with this ground, then this function over here, it's gonna give us a true value, else it will give us a false value if the circle don't collide with this ground. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna store the result. Basically we're gonna store the result in this is ground parameter. So this is ground, as you can see, we created a bool parameter which can be true or false, and we created this parameter just in order to keep track of if we standing on this ground or not. So what we will do, so we will store this result. If the circle is colliding, then we're gonna put it into a variable, or we're gonna store it in this is ground, and let's set equal to this. So this is ground can be true or false depending upon if the circle really colliding with this ground or not. Let's suppose circle collide with this ground, then this function over here gonna give us a true value, so that's why this is ground just gonna be true. Else if the circle don't collide with that ground, then it's gonna give us a false value, so that's why this is ground will be false, because we directly setting it, as you can see. And we can print out the message. So what we will do, if the circle is really colliding with this ground, then we just wanna print out a message. So printing out, we're gonna type this debug, sorry, we're gonna type this debug dot log, and let's say in quotation, touching player, let's say player touching the, and top of that basically I'm gonna type ground is, and top of that I'm gonna add the message, so plus, and I'm gonna put my is ground, which can be true or false. And let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Ctrl S on our keyboard in order to save. And if we move over to Unity, so this message should be pop up, so player touching the ground is, and then we just put our is ground, which can be true or false. Let's suppose the circle collide, so this is just gonna be true, so the message should be pop up in our console tab, player touching the ground is true, else it's gonna be false. So just wait, and once we are complete, we can see that. So I'm gonna select my console tab, and I'm gonna select my player came object in the hierarchy. Let's drag it up somewhere around here. So over here, it's not the circle not gonna collide with this ground, so the message should be pop up in our console tab, which is player touching the ground is false. But once our circle collide with this ground, then the message should be pop up in our console tab, player touching the ground is true. So let's have a look. So I'm gonna click on this play button in the top in order to play my game, and let's have a look on this. So just wait a moment. So as you can see, if I pause my game and just move over to my console tab and scroll up, we can see player touching the ground is false once our player was here. But as soon as player collide with this ground, the message in our console tab getting pop up says player touching ground is true. So as you can see, instead of doing this, we're gonna make two jumps once the circle collide with this ground. So but the problem is that we're not able to see our circle. So we do know that in order to see our circle, we need to use another function. So let's get out of play mode, and let's double click on this message in order to move over to that line of code. And for that, we do know we need to use a function. So we will go to bottom of our player class, and let's include it over here. So we need to use this on draw gizmo selected function. So make sure you did as I did over here, else it's not gonna work. So this function just draw whatever we just want to draw. So we want to draw our circle around this. So if I select my player around this ground checkpoint. But before we draw the circle, we need to check if our ground checkpoint is not equal to null or not. Basically, we're gonna use this if. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. So before we create the circle, we need to check. Basically, let's suppose if you haven't dragged this ground check to this ground check field, so it's gonna be empty. So we not so that function just gonna still try to draw, but it's not gonna able to find this point, so that's why it's gonna throw us an error. So that's why before we draw the circle, we need to check. We will check if our ground checkpoint, if it's not equal to null. Basically means this right over here, it's not empty, basically none. We basically drag it our ground checkpoint to this ground check point field, means we have it. So in that situation, it's basically means these things. If ground checkpoint is not equal to null, basically means we just assign it our ground checkpoint. So if that is the case, then we are ready to draw the circle. And in order to draw the circle, we need to use this gizmos dot draw where sphere function, and we do know this function as a first argument. It's gonna take the point from where we want to draw the circle. So we will pass our ground checkpoint dot position, and the second thing, it's gonna take their radius. So we will pass our check radius and then close that up with semicolon. And if you want to choose a color, then you can also choose that the color you would like to draw with, or by default it's gonna draw with white color, but I want with a yellow color. So before I create the circle, I also gonna assign the color. So I'm gonna set gizmos dot color color equal to color dot the color that you would like to go with. So I'm gonna go with color dot yellow. So let's put color dot yellow, something like that, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as our player script just gonna compiles, we will able to notice our circle will be drawn from this feet of this player game object, from this ground checkpoint. As you can see, as soon as it gets compiled. So now we're gonna notice as soon as this circle just gonna collide with this ground right over here, the message should be pop up in our console tab, says player touching the ground is true, else it's gonna pop up something like saying player touching the ground is false. But before we do, make sure you select your parent game object, in our case player. Then we will move over to inspector overrides and then apply all. If you just turn it your player into a prefab, so whatever changes you made over here, it's gonna be saved into your player game object prefab as well. So before you do, make sure you select your player game object and drag it over to your assets folder in project tab. And now if we click on this play button in the top, we should able to notice that message just gonna pop up in our console tab, sets jump. So just wait a moment. So now as soon as it's colliding, we can see, so we can jump as many times we want. So what we will do now, we're gonna get out of play mode. Instead of printing out message, we're gonna do something else. Basically we will move over to our script, and let's go to top of our class, and let's declare two variable. So we will declare two variable. It's basically in order to jump. So we're gonna make another serialized field. Basically we want to mark this parameter to true, so that's why we're gonna do this serialized field private, and that will be float parameter, and we can call this one to something like extra jumps. So let's call it extra jumps, and by default I'm gonna set equal to 2f. Since I want 2 jumps, so that's why by default I just set equal to 2f. Another parameter we're gonna create, and that doesn't need to be public, so instead we can make that one private. So why we creating this parameter? Basically to just keep track of how many jumps we want. So this parameter doesn't need to be public, so we can simply type private float, and we're gonna call this one total jumps. So let's call it total jumps, and let's close that up with semicolon. So by default this is gonna be 0. So what we will do, we will move over to this start function. So we do know that a start function get called in the start of the game. So in the start of the game, what we will do, we will set our total jumps equal to our extra jumps. Let's close that up with semicolon. So we just set equal to our extra jumps, and by default we have given extra jumps to 2. So this right over here is true, so that's why this total jumps in the start of the game just gonna be 2. And now we're gonna move over to where we pressing space key over here, and I'm gonna remove this is ground false right over here. I'm gonna remove that. So we're calling the jump function. So if we press down space key, at the same time I'm gonna check. So we're gonna put this in end condition, and we will check if our total jumps is greater than 0f. And we do know that in the start of the game this total jumps gonna be 2, since we just setting equal to our extra jump, which is 2. So this one over here is 2, so that's why this total jump just gonna be 2. So and we checking over here that if we press down space key, at the same time total jump is greater than 0, and we do know in this start of the game it's gonna be, so this total jumps right over here will be 2, and 2 is greater than 0f, means we will able to jump. So after jumping, what we want to do, we just gonna subtract from this total jump by 1 unit. So what we will do after jumping, we're gonna subtract from this total jumps minus equal 1. So we just subtracting, or you can put f at the end, since this is a float number, so you can put f. And now let's suppose we press down for the first time space key, then the space key. So this total jumps we subtracting 1. So this 1 is in the start of the game is 2, so 2 minus 1 gonna be 1. And let's suppose we press down space key one more time, so this total jumps is now 1. 1 is still greater than 0, so that's why we will able to jump for the next time as well. So this total jumps is now 1, so 1 minus 1 just gonna be 0. And now if we press down space key for the third time, so this total jumps right over here is now 0, and 0 is not greater than 0. 0 is equals to 0. So this condition over here is false, but this one is true. So that's why we're not gonna able to jump for the third time, since this total jumps is 0, and 0 is not greater than 0. So we will not gonna able to jump for the third time. So let's press down Ctrl S to save our skip, and let's move over to Unity. So we're gonna press down space key on our keyboard. If we press down space key 2 times on our keyboard, we will able to jump. But once we press down space key third time, we're not gonna able to jump, because that total jumps just gonna be 0, and 0 is not greater than 0. So that if condition will be false. And let me show you. But before I show, I'm gonna make my jump height a little bit small. So I will move over to my player skip, and I'm gonna make my jump height something around 8. And let's click on this play button in the top in order to start our game, and let's take a look on this. So we will able to jump 2 times only, but once we press down space key for the third time, we're not gonna able to jump at all, because that total jumps will be at 0. So press down, as you can see I am able to jump, but for the next time we're not able to jump. So we just made only 2 jumps. So we're gonna get out of play mode. As you can see, we printing out message once our this circle collide with this ground. So in that situation, what we're gonna do, once our circle collide with this ground, then we will set again total jumps to our extra jumps, which is 2, as you can see underneath our player skip. So that's why we created that is ground parameter, just to keep track of if this player or this circle collide with this ground or not. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna open up that message instead of printing out. So we doing it over here. Let's remove that. What we will do, we will check. So we will check if, so we're gonna use this if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if is ground is true. Is true, basically if you live like this, it's basically means true. And also we're gonna check if our total jumps, if it's lesser than or equal to 0, basically means we don't have any jump at all. Then what we can do, So is ground true basically means that this circle over here collide with this ground. So as soon as it's gonna collide with the ground, at the same time, if our total jumps is not is basically 0 or lesser than 0, so in that moment we will set back this total jumps to our extra jump. So we will set our total jumps equal to our extra jumps, which is 2 by default we set, as you can see. So once again, this total jumps just gonna be 2 as soon as this circle right over here collide with this ground. So if I now move over to this space key, so if we press down space key at the same time, total jumps is greater than, so we just subtracting, we do know that. So we're gonna make two jumps in the, but as soon as we gonna collide with our ground, then total jumps again we're setting back to 2. So this one over here becomes 2 one more time, and we do know that 2 is greater than 0 f. Basically means we as soon as we're gonna collide with that ground, we will able to make 2 jumps. But once our 2 jumps is over, then we're not gonna make a jump at all. But as soon as this circle collide with this ground one more time, then we're setting back our total jumps to our extra jumps, as you can see, which is 2. So that's why this over here becomes 2, and so this one is 2. So this condition it's becoming true because 2 is greater than 0 f, means we will able to jump for the next time as well. So I hope you get the idea, and now we're gonna press down Ctrl S in order to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as this player game object just gonna land top of this ground, we will able to make 2 jumps, and once we are in the air and 2 jumps is over, we're not gonna make jump. But as soon as this player just gonna collide with this ground one more time, we will able to make 2 jumps. So let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game, and let's take a look on this. So now if we as you can see, we making 2 jumps, but we not making. So as you can see, so we can increase up the jump height. So I'm gonna make something around 12, and now if I press down space key, as you can see, we only able to make 2 jumps once our player game object collide with this ground, but we not making more than 2 jumps, as you can see, since we just set extra jumps to 2. And let's suppose if we set underneath our player script extra jump to something like 3, now we're gonna make able to make our 3 extra jumps. So as you can see, so you can jump as many times you want. So that's why we just created those 2 parameters to just keep track of how many jumps we can make. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. Let's suppose you want 3 jumps, then you can set this extra jumps to 3. So right over here total jumps is gonna be 3, and what we make for the first time, so total jumps is 3. So 3 minus 1 gonna be 2, and once we press down second time space key on our keyboard, so this total jumps is now 2. So 2 minus 1 just gonna be 1, and once we press down space key on our keyboard third time, so this total jumps is 1. So 1 minus 1 gonna be 0, means we will lose all of our jumps, and once we lose, we are basically not gonna able to jump anymore. But once we collide with that ground and total jumps is lesser than, then we again setting back our total jumps to our extra jumps that we set, which is 2. So or 3, you can just play around with it. It's basically totally up to you. It's manageable, so that's why we just created those 2 parameters, basically just to keep track of how many jumps we can make. And it's totally up to you. If you just want 1 jump, then you can put extra jump to 1, and if you want 5 jumps, then you can put extra jumps to 5. It's totally manageable or adjustable. So that is the thing. And make sure you just go to inspector overrides and then apply all if you turn your player into a prefab. So make sure you just do that. We will shoot out some projectile. So I will head over to my project tab, assets, and then sprites folder. I will give a link in the description. You can go and check that out. So we have the projectiles, as you can see. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select any of them. So let's select this one. Let's drag it over to the scene view or into this hierarchy. So let's drag it into the scene view, and let's call this one projectile, something like that. And as you can notice that it seems too much small, so we will select all of the sprite from that folder by holding down shift, go over to inspector, and pixel per unit make a less number in order to make it big. So we're going to make it something around 32, or let's make it 16. And to get rid of blurry, we're going to choose filter mode to point no filter, and let's click on this apply button. So now as you can see, this seems fine, but I just want this to be a little bit small, so I'm going to choose this pixel per unit a bigger number, something around 24, and let's click on this apply button. And now this seems pretty much cool. So I'm gonna select my projectile in the hierarchy. Let's drag it in the top of our hierarchy so we can see all the time, and we will add up some components to this projectile. So first thing what we will do, we will add a, so let's click on this add component. So we will add a rigid body 2D for gravity, and we're gonna scale up the gravity a bit, but I'm gonna leave with you can say 1. And collision detection, I'm gonna choose continuous. And interpolate, we're gonna choose interpolate to making out a little bit smooth, and that's it. And now what we will do, we will add another component for collider 2D for collision detection. So let's click on this add component, and let's add a box collider 2D, and let's click on this edit collider, and let's edit the collider as the size of our projectile, something like this. And we will move over to our box collider 2D, and we will set this is trigger to true, so it's gonna check with trigger. If our projectile trigger with this enemy game object, then we're gonna destroy it. So basically that is the reason. And now what we will do, we're gonna turn this projectile a prefab, so we're gonna have the copy. But before we do, let's make the animation, since we have animation of this sprite. So we will select from this start basically all of them by holding down shift, and then drag it over to this projectile game object in the hierarchy, top of this projectile game object in the hierarchy. As you can see, it's gonna create the animation right away, and we need to choose a folder where we want to place it. So we will move over to assets in the top left first, assets, and we already created this animation folder as you can see. So we will open that up by double clicking on it, and let's create another subfolder for this projectile or this kind of animation. So we will call that folder to something like a staff animation, so let's, or object animation. So let's right click, then new folder, and I'm gonna call this folder to something like let's call it other underscore animations, since we're gonna have multiple animation things, so that's why. So let's open this up as well by double clicking on it, and we have to name the animation. So this will be the projectile one, so I'm gonna call it projectile, and let's click on this save button. And once we done, if we move over to animation tab and then select this projectile in the hierarchy, and then play this button, hit this play button, we can see the animation. But and this seems pretty much cool as you can notice. So now what we will do, we're gonna turn this projectile into a prefab. To do so, let's select our projectile in the hierarchy, and let's drag it over to this prefab folder in our project and then assets folder, or you can just simply drag it over to this assets folder as well. But to keep things clean, just create another subfolder by right clicking on this assets, then create in the top, and then folder, and name that folder whatever you want, something like prefabs. And now we turn it into a prefab. So what we will do, we will select our projectile, and we're gonna delete from the hierarchy for now, and we will shoot up once we're gonna click the left mouse button. So we're gonna shoot out the projectile. To do so, we will select our player game object in the hierarchy, and let's open up the player skip by double clicking on it in the inspector. And let's make another function for that, and we're gonna make it somewhere around here. Let's make this here, and for function we're gonna type void, and we have to name the function. So let's call it fire projectile, something like, or let's simply call it fire, then make first bracket and some curly brackets. So inside this function what we need to do, we need to spawn that projectile, and we do not to spawn that projectile, we need to use this instantiate function. And this function, as a first argument, it's going to take the game object that we want to spawn. Second thing, it's going to take the position, and the third thing, it's going to take the rotation. So we need to declare those variable first. So let's make this one comment for now by double forward slash, and let's go to top of our class and let's declare a variable for that. So firstly I'm gonna give a title or header. So for that we need to make these square brackets. Let's type header and let's call it something like shooting or fire. Let's call this section to fire. And so first thing what we need a reference of that projectile, and that projectile itself a whole game object. So we need to type a game object type. So we will make a serialized field private, even though we just marked as private, and we just made it serialized field, basically means we still gonna able to see this field underneath our player scape. So that projectile itself a whole game object. So we need to type this game object, and we're gonna call this one, let's call it projectile prefab. So let's call it projectile prefab, and let's close that up with semicolon. And the second thing, it's gonna take the position. So let's create another serialized field private, and for position we need to type this transform, which is responsible for position, rotation, and in scale. And let's call it something like fire point. Let's call it fire point, something like that. Also we need one more variable, basically the force that we want to add up. So we also want to add up in the y, some unit in the y, some unit in the x. So the projectile just gonna shoot like this, and for gravity it's gonna fall down. So that is the thing. So that's why we added a rigid body 2D to that projectile. So it's gonna fall down due to our gravity. So we need to add some unit of force in the y as well as in the x. So basically that is the thing. So let's create two variable for it. So let's make serialized field private, and that will be float, and we can call this one y velocity. So let's call it y velocity, and by default I'm gonna give something around 10f. And also we need x velocity or some x force, you can say. So let's make another serialized field private float. Let's call it x velocity, x velo sorry velo velocity, and let's set equal to something around 10f. I'm going to make this one y velocity a up something like 15 and 10 in the x velocity. And let's press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move over to Unity. So underneath our player script we will able to see those parameters. So you can create a separate script for that as well if you do want, or just want to organize your project, then you can just create a fire script something like that and attach to your player game object, and then declare those variable and make that function. So it's gonna be clean, but I'm just gonna do inside my player script. So that's why I have done in this way. You can just do it with another script as well. It's totally up to you, and basically to make your or our project a little bit clean. So now if I select my player game object in the hierarchy, as you can see underneath our player script fire title, and we can see that projectile prefab, and it says none game object, basically empty. So what we need to do over here, we basically need to select our projectile from that folder, and let's drag it over here. Now we can see we have the projectile prefab, and we are ready to shoot it. And also we need a point from where we want to shoot it. So let's create a fire point in this player game object. So what we will do, we will select our player game object in the hierarchy. Let's right click on it, and let's create an empty child game object, and we can call this game object to something like fire. Let's call it fire point. and let's select the move tool in the scene view, and let's move it somewhere around here. From this position we want to shoot out the projectile, so that's why. And we will move over to inspector. Let's click on this box and we're gonna choose a gizmos for it, something like this one, to make it visible. And now that's fine. So we will select our fire point and let's drag it to this fire point in our playerscape. Now we have our projectile as well as the point from where we want to shoot out. So let's open up our player game script by double clicking on it, and let's move over to a fire function. So over here, and let's remove these two slashes. So the first thing, it's will take the game object that we want to spawn, so we will pass our projectile prefab. And the second thing, it's gonna take the position, so we will pass our fire point dot position. We need to access the position. And the third argument, it's gonna take the rotation, so we will pass our quaternion dot identity, basically means no rotation. And let's close that up with semicolon, and we will press down Ctrl S to save our script. But we also need to call this function. But when we should call it, once I'm gonna click the left mouse button, then I'm gonna call the fire function, and fire function is gonna spawn this projectile prefab at this point with no rotation, as you can notice. So I'm gonna move over to my update function, and let's do it in the bottom of our update function. So whenever I click the left mouse button, then I'm gonna call the fire function to call it. So let's use this, let's check for some input. So let's use this if condition, and let's check over here. So we will use input dot get mouse button down, and we need to make these brackets, and inside these brackets we need to pass the index. So let's suppose we pass 1 basically means that we clicking the right mouse button. Since I want to check with left mouse button, so that's why I'm gonna put 0. So if input dot get mouse button down 0 basically means that if we click the left mouse button, that what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna call the fire function. So let's call it over here fire. Let's make first bracket and then close that up with semicolon, and we will press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So we should able to see that whenever we're gonna click the left mouse button, we will see our projectile just gonna spawn from our fire point, since we spawning from that position. And but before we do, let's go over to this player game object inspector, overrides, and then apply all. So the changes we made over here, it's gonna be saved. And now I'm gonna click on this play button in the top in order to start my game, and let's click the left mouse button. So we should able to see as soon as we're gonna click that projectile prefab just gonna spawn from our fire point. So let's take a look on this. So just wait a little moment. So as you can see, it's spawning and it's getting fall down. So if I pause my game, we can see that, I guess over here, as you can notice, it's can fall down. Why? Because of rigid body that we add, which is responsible for gravity. So that's why it just falling down as soon as it's spawning. So what we need to do now, if I unpause and then spawn it, as you can see, so we need a some kind of velocity in the y as well as in the x. So that's why we created those two parameters. So we're gonna use that. So let's get out of play mode and let's move over to our script. As you can see, we're spawning that projectile prefab at this point with no rotation. So what we're gonna do now, after spawning that, we're gonna store that projectile into another game object container, you can simply say, or variable, and that will be game object type. Why? Because this projectile prefab itself a whole game object, so that's why we need to put a container with the same type container or a variable. And we're gonna call this one temp projectile or temporary projectile, you can simply say, and let's set equal to this. And if I miss spelling, I really apologize. If the spelling is wrong of this projectile, then I really apologize for it. So now what we basically have done, we spawned this projectile prefab at this position with no rotation, and after spawning that projectile prefab, we storing into this temp projectile container or a variable. We storing that after spawning. And now what we basically need, we need a reference of that rigid body 2D. So if I move over to project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, and select this projectile and move over to inspector, as you can see we added the rigid body 2D, and we do know that this rigid body 2D is responsible for velocity, adding force, and all kind of things. So that's why we need a reference of this rigid body 2D. Basically we need to go over to this rigid body 2D of this projectile, then we can just add the force that we want to add up. So basically that is the thing. So now what we will do, we will go to temp projectile, basically where we store it, and now we're gonna get the component. So let's use this dot get component, and we need to make these arrows, and the component we're looking for of that projectile prefab is rigid body 2D. So that's why inside this arrows we're gonna pass this rigid body 2D, then make this first bracket, and we need to add that up, which is so basically we just want to add the force. So we're gonna use this dot add force and then make this first bracket. So basically what we're doing, we basically going over to this projectile prefab, and then we using get component in order to get the component which we looking for. So in our case rigid body, you can simply say that we just going over to this projectile rigid body 2D, and we using this dot add force, as you can see, and it's gonna take a vector 2 which gonna have x axis and y axis. So we will pass a new vector 2 which gonna have x axis comma y axis, and this is a force. So that's why comma as a second argument we're gonna pass our force mode 2D dot impulse, and make sure you close that up with semicolon. So in the x, what we will do, we're gonna replace this x with our x velocity. That's we declare it in the top of our class, as you can see right underneath our fire title. So we can see we have the x velocity and the y velocity. So we're gonna replace that x with our x velocity. So we will type our x velocity, and in the y we're gonna do y velocity, and let's close that up with semicolon. Let's press down Ctrl S to save our escape, and now let's move over to Unity. So we should able to see that we just adding a force in the x, which is x velocity, and by default we have given something around 10, and in the y I do believe that we have given a default value which is 15 or something like that. So if I select my player game object, as you can see in the y velocity is 15 and the x velocity is 10. So now if I click on this play button and then click left mouse button, we should able to see that projectile prefab just gonna go up, as well as it's gonna go in the x axis, since we just added a force in the x as well as in the y, and it's gonna fall down due to our gravity. So let's have a look. So if I, as you can see, indeed it's just doing, but the problem is that it seems like it's too much fast. So what we can simply do in our play mode we can do, so we can go over to our player escape, and y velocity we can put something around 4, and x velocity we can put something around 3. So now if I do that, as you can see, this seems pretty much cool, but it would be nice if we just make the x velocity a little bit up. So let's make it something around 6, and y velocity we're gonna make it something around 5. So now if I shoot, as you can see, this seems pretty much cool, and we can increase that as well. So we can make it a y velocity something around 6, and the x velocity we can make it around 8. So now as you can see, this seems pretty much cool. In the y we just adding 6, and in the x we adding 8. So make sure but if you just get out of play mode, it will not be safe. It will just get into a default value. So what you can simply do, you can just copy this number, or you can simply right click on this player component, player strip, then click on this copy component, and once you get out of play mode, then right click on this script and then click on this paste component values or paste component as new. You can do that as well. Basically it's up to you. But the problem is that if we move over to hierarchy or in the scene view, we can see in the hierarchy we have many projectile prefabs, and it's not deleting after some period of time. So we also need to destroy this projectile once it's we don't need it, we need to destroy. So if we move to hierarchy, we can see we have a lot of projectiles still in the hierarchy, or you can simply say in the scene view as well, or in the game. So we need to destroy after some amount of time, or else our game just gonna hold too many game objects. So that's why after some period of time our frame rate will be less, or just the game just gonna lag. So that's why. So we will get out of play mode and we will open up our player script. Let's go to over here. So we adding the force as you can see. So basically we simply moving over to this projectile that we spawned, then accessing this rigid body 2D, and we using this dot add force function in order to add the force, and in the x we pass x velocity and the y we pass y velocity. So if I select my player game object and then player scape, so in the x we seen if we make it something around 7.5 it would be fine, and in the y we're gonna make it something around 6.2, something like that. And make sure you just go to inspector overrides and then apply all. If you turn your player game object into a prefab, then you can just do that. So we need to destroy that prefab as well, basically that whatever we spawned. So in our case we spawned that projectile prefab and we store it into this temp projectile, and then we just accessing the rigid body and we just adding the force. So we need to destroy this temp projectile, or where we store it our that projectile prefab. So to destroy that, we're gonna use this destroy function, and this destroy function as a first argument, we do know it's gonna take the game object that we want to destroy. So we will pass our temp projectile, since we store it into that container or into that variable. Second thing, comma, you can specify the time, after how much amount of time you just want to destroy that. So I'm gonna destroy after something like 4.5 second. 4.5 I'm gonna put, and let's close that up with semicolon. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and now let's move over to Unity, and it should be fine. So after 4.5 seconds, we should able to see those projectile prefab just gonna destroy itself. Since we pass as a second argument the time that after which amount of time we basically want to destroy. So I'm gonna move over to my console tab. I'm gonna click on this clear in the top left to keep it clean, and let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game, and let's take a look on this. So as soon as we're gonna click the left mouse button, that projectile prefab just gonna spawn from our fire point, and it will fall down due to our gravity, and we can play around gravity. So now if I click the left mouse button, as you can see it's spawning, and after 5 seconds we see it as so right over here it's destroying. Basically after 4.5 seconds, as you can notice in this scene view, if I zoom in by scrolling our mouse, you will see. So something over here it's destroying because the we have put it the time. So we can get out of play mode, and we can just keep a smaller number. Instead of doing giving 4.5, I'm gonna give something around 3f. Basically after 3 seconds it's gonna destroy itself, since we check that it's destroying after in the after a long period of time. So that's why we just shrink down the time with 3. You can give it 2 seconds as well, but I'm gonna go with 3 seconds. So I'm gonna put 3f, and let's press down Ctrl S one more time, and let's move over to Unity. So after 3 seconds it should be destroyed. basically those projectile will destroy itself after 3 seconds. So let's take a look on this. So just wait a little moment. Once it's done, we can check that out. So now if I move up here, so let's click on this play button in the top in order to start our game. And once we gonna shoot out our projectile, and it's gonna fall down due to our gravity. So let's have a look on this. So now if I click the left mouse button, we can see that after over here it's destroying. Basically after 3 seconds this projectile prefab getting destroyed itself, and by this we can notice that if we move over to hierarchy, it seems lot more clean. We don't have any projectile clone or that game object as well as in this scene view. So make sure you just do that. I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, and make sure you just press down Ctrl S on your keyboard. So whatever you have done in Unity project, it will be saved right away. Or you can simply move over to top left file and then click on this save button to save your project. And before you save, make sure you also go to this player game object, then inspector overrides, and then apply all. If you change anything in this player script or in player components, then it's gonna be safe. And after that you can simply press down Ctrl S in order to save your project. We're shooting out projectile, let me show you. But the problem is that we're shooting in the wrong direction. Even if we just move to the left direction and try to shoot in that direction, we're not doing at all. The projectile always going to the right direction. Let me show you. So if I just left click my mouse, as you can see, I just looking towards to the left direction, and if I shoot my projectile is going to the right direction, which is totally wrong. We need to shoot out the projectile in the left direction as well. To do so, we will get out of play mode, and for it we will open up our script. So let's go to player, let's select the player game object in the hierarchy, and let's open up the player script by double clicking on it. And let's move over to where we're shooting. So we firing right over here, we adding the force right over here. As you can see, we have x velocity and y velocity, a vector 2. So we're gonna multiply this force with our direction. So what we will do, we will multiply with transform. So let's multiply with this transform, sorry, this will be transform dot right. Transform dot right basically means which direction we looking. So let's suppose this player is looking to the left direction, so transform dot right there will be the left direction, or in which direction player is flipping. So we just multiplying our force with the direction. As you can see, now it's gonna shoot in the direction the player is looking at. Now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and now let's move over to Unity. So we should able to notice that we will shoot our projectile in the direction player is facing. So just let me show you. Let it compile for a few seconds. Once it's done, we are ready to check that out. So just wait for a little moment. Now it's done, and if we go ahead and then click on this play button, we should able to see. So just wait a little moment. So now if we flip to the left direction and click left mouse button, as you can see, we're shooting to the left direction. But the problem is that our projectile is looking to the right direction. We also need to working on it. So what we will do, we will get out of play mode, and we will move over to our script. Right over here we're shooting our projectile. As you can see, we're shooting our projectile at this position with no rotation. Instead of passing this quaternion dot identity, we're gonna what we will do, we will pass our fire point dot right. Basically means which direction fire point, or we fire point basically the point. So if I select my fire point, so this is our fire point, and select the move tool in the scene view. So fire point rotation just gonna be in the direction fire point is facing. So instead of typing quaternion dot identity, basically no rotation, we're gonna pass this fire point dot rotation. Fire point dot rotation basically just gonna be rotate. So now our projectile should be rotate in the direction it's going. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S one more time to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity, and we should able to see that. So just wait a little moment, and it should be fine by now. So let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game. So now we should able to see. So as you can see now it's totally fine, but the problem is that we're shooting too much less, you can say. So what we can do, we can simply bump up the value. So I'm gonna select my player game object in the hierarchy, then go over to inspector, player script, and let's move over to a y velocity and this x velocity. So x velocity, I'm going to choose something around, let's choose 20, and y velocity I'm going to choose 10. So now if I shoot out the projectile, as you can see it's totally moving a little bit fast. I want a little bit up in the y axis, so y velocity I'm gonna choose something around 20. And now if I shoot, I guess it's okay. We can just decrease this x value. Sorry, we're gonna do it something around 10, and this let's bump up to 30, or let's do it 25. And in the y I'm gonna do 50. So it's kind of work. So we can go with this value as well, as you can see, I think. But if you just get out of play mode, this right over here will not be saved at all. So to make sure this saved, you just right click on your player script and then click on this copy component, or you can remember this y velocity and the x velocity. But instead of doing that, right click on this player script, then click on this copy component, then get out of play mode. And as soon as I get out of play mode, as you can see those values not saved at all. But what we can do, we can simply right click on this player script, and then we can just click on this component values, and as soon as we paste it, we can see by now and it's fine. And make sure you just move over to inspector overrides, and we're gonna click on this apply all, and this is pretty much great. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a script, a script for our bullet to damage our enemy. As you've seen that the bullet is colliding with this enemy game object, but it not destroying itself, and this enemy also not taking damage at all. So that's why we will gonna create a separate script for our bullet. So what we will do, we will move over to our project tab, assets, and then script folder. Let's right click there, create, and then mono behavior script, or you can simply move over to scripting and click on this mono behavior script, and you can name that script to something like enemy bullet. So I'm gonna call this one, sorry, not enemy bullet, this will be our player bullet. But instead of calling player bullet, I'm gonna call it bullet simply, or we can simply call it projectile as well, since this is our projectile. So I'm gonna call it sorry, projectile, something like that. I guess I'm just misspelling, which will be projectile. And now this is fine, and let's open that up, this script, by double clicking on it. Let's open that up quickly by double clicking on it. and we need to attach this script to our projectile prefab. So we need to attach that. So just wait a little moment. So we're going to move over to our script, and now let's move over to Unity one more time. And Unity just gonna take few moments to compile our script, and once it's done we can just add up this script to our projectile prefab. And once it's done we are ready to do that. Basically we're gonna create. So firstly we will head over to our project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, and let's find out our projectile right over here. So we need to find it. So let's I cannot able to see right over here projectile, so we can see right here this one. So let's select this one, go over to inspector, and we're gonna attach the component right over here. So you can just click on this lock button in the top, in the inspector top right. You can see you can lock it, and then you can just move over to your project tab one more time, then script folder, and you can choose the folder. So in my case this projectile script, and we can simply drag it over to this add component section. Or what you can simply do, you can click on this add component, and you can find the component by typing name of the component. So in our case that will be projectile. I already attached, so I'm not gonna do it one more time. You can just use any way it if you like. Basically it's totally up to you how you want. And make sure you go over to inspector one more time, and then click on this unlock button. So it's gonna be inspector will be unlocked, and you can inspect any game object you want in the hierarchy. So make sure you just do that. Now let's open up our script projectile. So we're gonna double click on it in order to open that up. So what we want to do over here, we're gonna remove this start and update function. Instead we're gonna use something else. So if I move over to Unity, we want to damage this enemy game object, and if I select my enemy game object in the hierarchy, so let's go to hierarchy, then this enemy. As you can see, we tagged this enemy as a enemy tag in the inspector, you can notice. So what we want to do, as soon as our projectile collide with this enemy game object, then we just want to destroy our projectile, and also we're gonna damage our enemy. But before we do, let's do it. And if I select my projectile prefabs from that prefabs folder in our project tab, and go over to inspector, and then our box collider 2D. As you can see, we check this is trigger to true. So we're gonna use on trigger inter 2D function. That's why we're gonna use on trigger inter 2D function for checking if we trigger with something, and if we trigger with this enemy game object, then we're gonna destroy it. So let's open up our projectile script, and over here we're gonna use this on trigger inter 2D function. So this function on trigger inter 2D, this function get called when we trigger with something, and we can extract information what we trigger it with by going over to collision parameter. As you can see, we can extract information like the game name of the game object, tag of the game object, or anything like that. So what we will do over here, we will check what we trigger it with. If we trigger it with that enemy game object, then we're gonna damage that enemy, as well as we need to shoot the we need to destroy our projectile itself right away as soon as it's gonna collide with that, or it's gonna trigger with that enemy game object. So we will check. So we're gonna use this if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and what we want to check over here, we're gonna basically check. So we're gonna use this collision parameter, collision dot game object dot tag, and we will check if the tag is equals to our enemy. If that is the case, what basically this means, so collision dot game object basically means the game object we trigger it with. So the projectile trigger just gonna trigger with this enemy game object. So collision dot game object there basically means enemy game object, and then what we doing, accessing the tag of that game object. So we just going over to this enemy game object and accessing the tag, and we can see the tag is enemy, and we checking the tag is equals to enemy. So make sure you do inside quotation, and definitely it's gonna and trigger with that enemy game object, and the tag is enemy. We do know that enemy game object tag is enemy, means the means the projectile really triggering with that enemy game object. So now what we have to do, we need to destroy our projectile right away. But before we destroy, we just want to check if it's working or not. For that, we're gonna type this debug.log for printing out message, and we're gonna say inside quotation. So we need to pass string, basically the message we want to see. So uh, let's say projectile trigger it with enemy, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Control S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as our projectile just gonna trigger with this enemy game object, that message just gonna pop up underneath our console tab. Why? Because as you can see, we checking before we trigger it. As you can see right over here, we just accessing the enemy game object tag, and we checking if the tag is equals to enemy. If that is the case, then we just doing that thing, basically printing out the message. And now if I select my console tab and then click on this play button in the top in order to start our game, you will see that. So just wait a little moment, and once it's done, we are ready to check that out. So just wait for a little moment. And now if I shoot out projectile, as you can see, as soon as the projectile is triggering with this enemy game object, the message in our console tab, we can see projectile trigger with enemy message just getting pop up. So instead of printing out message, we basically want to destroy the enemy. Basically we don't want to damage this enemy, and also we want to destroy our, you can simply say, the projectile itself. So let's get out of play mode and let's double click on this message. So I want the message like projectile triggered with, or I'm gonna say something like damage enemy. So let's say something like damage enemy. And after printing out message, I want to destroy this projectile itself, the projectile game object itself. So to destroy it, we need to use this destroy function, and it's gonna take the game object that we want to destroy. So since this script is attached to our projectile, so we want to destroy our projectile itself. So that's why we're gonna pass this dot game object. It is basically means it just referencing projectile game object itself. And now we're gonna close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Control S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as our projectile just gonna trigger with this enemy game object, the projectile will be destroyed right away, and the message in our console tab before it destroyed just gonna pop up says damage enemy. So just wait a moment, and once it's done, we can see that. So now, so just wait a little moment and it's done. So if I just click on this play button in the top, it should work fine. So just wait a little moment. So now, as you can see, as soon as our projectile triggering with this enemy game object, projectile just getting destroyed itself right away, and we can just slow up the velocity of the projectile. So what we can do, we can select simply our player game object in the hierarchy. Let's go over to player script in the inspector, and we're gonna make the x velocity something around 15. And now if we do, I think this is fine by now. We can just bump up a little bit. Let's do 17, and I guess it's fine. As you can see, as soon as our projectile triggering with this enemy game object, it just destroying itself. And now what we have to do, I'm gonna get out of play mode, and I'm gonna choose our x velocity to something around 17. So make sure you just remember that, or you can simply the copy as we have done earlier. So the message in our console tab getting pop-up says damage enemy. And now let's do with our enemy game object. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna select our enemy game object in the hierarchy, or you can simply move over to your project tab, then assets folder, then prefabs folder, and you can find the enemy right over here. So right over here we can select that, and then we can go over to inspector and we can double click on this enemy script in order to open that up in Visual Studio, or you can simply in the select in the hierarchy as well. But doing imperfectly, make sure you just select the prefab and then go over to inspector and open up the script by double clicking on it, and it's gonna be fine. So before we damage our enemy, we need to give some health amount to this enemy game object. So what we will do, we will move over to our script and let's go to top of our class and let's declare a variable for our enemy health. So let's make a public int that will be int, which is whole numbers like 0 1 2 3 4, and we can call this one max health, and by default I'm gonna give something around 2 unit of health. Let's give it, and we also need to make a function in order to take damage. So to do that, I'm gonna move it somewhere over here. You can do it anywhere you like. It doesn't need to be in order to do something I am doing like this. So, and we're gonna make this function public because we're gonna call this function from another class or through another script. So that's why we need to mark this function as public. So we will mark this function public, and for function we're gonna type void and we have to name the function. So I'm gonna call this one take damage. So let's call it take damage. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and this take damage function just gonna take an argument and it's gonna be in type, and we can simply call this one damage. Basically you can replace this damage parameter once you're gonna call the function with any number that you like. You can replace with 1, you can replace with 2, it's totally up to you. So now what we want to do, what we basically want to do inside this function, we basically want to damage our enemy. Basically we need to subtract some health amount from this max health of this enemy game object once we're gonna call this take damage function. So what we will do, we will subtract from our max health minus equal our damage amount. So so we do know that in the start of the game max health is 2, and let's suppose we call this function this take damage, and as a damage parameter we just let's suppose assume that 1. So the max health is 2, so 2 minus 1 just gonna be 1. So the max health of our enemy game object now is 1, and if we call this take damage function one more time, so the take damage function one more time, so the max health is now 1. So 1 minus 1 gonna be 0. So somehow our max health of enemy game object just gonna hit 0. So what we need to do in that situation, we need to destroy our enemy. But before we destroy, we also need to make sure we don't subtract anymore. Let's suppose the max health of enemy game object is already 0, and if we call this function, so the max health is 0, so 0 minus 1 just gonna be minus 1. So the max health will go to negative value. So once our enemy game object max health is already 0, then we need to stop taking damage. So that's why before we take damage, we just want to check if our max health, so if max health is lesser than or equal to 0, if that is the case, let's make some curly brackets. So in that moment we need to stop taking damage. So we basically need to stop doing these things right over here. So that's why we're gonna type this return, and we do know that after return whatever we're gonna do, it's not gonna work. Basically this line of code will not be execute, means we're not gonna take any damage once our enemy max health reaches 0. So it will stack, so the max health of enemy game object just gonna stack at 0. Else the max health is not lesser than or equal to 0. So in that situation what we're gonna do, we're gonna subtract. So we're gonna cut this and let's paste it inside over here. So else our max health is of enemy game object is not lesser than or equal to 0, then as you can see we just subtracting from our max health. So basically this is the cool thing. So now this is fine, but we also need to make the die function. Once our max health of enemy game object reaches 0, we need to destroy the enemy right away. So before we destroy, we're gonna do it over here. So to destroy it, we're gonna use this and it doesn't need to be public. For function, we're gonna type void. So this function automatically just gonna private if we just don't assign with like this public, or you can private like that. It's automatically just gonna be marked as a private function. And for function and I'm gonna name this function, call it die. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. For now, we're gonna print out the message. So what we will do, we're gonna print out message. So we're gonna type this debug.log, and we will say this dot name name, and top of that. So if you just want to add a message, you can just use this plus icon, and you have to pass inside this quotation something like that. I'm gonna say diet. So this dot name basically means it just referencing itself. So if I move over to Unity, so this dot name, so the script is attached to this enemy game object. So this dot name basically enemy game object name itself. So this dot name right over here gonna be enemy, since the enemy script is attached to our enemy game object. And top of that, we just added a custom message which is diet. So this message should be pop up in our console tab, says enemy diet. And we also need to call the die function. When we need to call it, once our maximum of enemy game object of that enemy game object reaches 0, then we're gonna call it. So we can call it right over here, but instead of doing that, we're gonna move over to our update function, and we will move over to top of our update function, and we're gonna do it over here. So why we're doing inside this update function? Because we just want to keep track of every single frame of the max health of our enemy game object. So we will check. So let's use this if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if our max health, if it's lesser than or equal to 0. If that is the case, basically means our enemy game object don't have any health. Now what we have to do, we're gonna call this die function. And what die function just gonna do, it's gonna print out the message player died in our console tab. So let's call it our die function here. So let's call the die function, sorry, and this will be die. And let's make first bracket, and let's close that up with semicolon. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save my script. And now let's move over to Unity. So we should able to see underneath our enemy script, and another field just gonna pop up, says max health, and by default we have given 2 unit. But you can play around with how much you want to give to your enemy game object. It's totally up to you. And we can see as soon as our enemy script compiles, max health just pop up, and by default we set it to true. And now if we go ahead and then click on this play button and shoot out projectile on this enemy game object, this enemy game object should take damage. So just wait a little moment, and once it's done we can check that out. So now if I shoot out the projectile, sorry, if I select this enemy game object in the hierarchy and then shoot out projectile, we can see that projectile is destroying itself. By the way, destroying itself, but anyway, the max health of this enemy game object, it's not going down. It's this enemy is not taking damage at all. Basically we just created the take damage function as you seen in our enemy script. So if I move over to my enemy script, we created this function, but we do know that we never calling it. So that's why it's not executing. Basically we're not taking damage at all. So we also need to call this take damage function, but when we shoot, once our projectile hits or trigger with this enemy game object. And if I move over to my console tab, so as soon as our projectile trigger with this enemy game object, we can see we just printing out message. So instead of printing out message, we're gonna call the function that we created inside our enemy script. So let's get out of play mode, and let's open up the enemy script by double clicking on it quickly. And instead of printing out message, we're gonna call the function. So in order to call it, we're gonna use this collision. So collision a parameter dot game object dot get component, and the component we're looking for is enemy script inside that enemy game object. So let's pass enemy, and then make this first bracket, and now we can call the function. So dot we need to type, and the function name, which is take damage. Let's make first bracket and close that up with semicolon. And we do know that this take damage function, it's gonna take an argument with for our damage as we have given. So as a damage you can just give 1, you can give 2. So let's suppose if we pass 2, and we do know that maximum of that enemy game object is 2, means if our projectile trigger with that enemy game object, enemy just gonna lose all of his health right away, since we have given 2 unit of health of that enemy game object. But I don't want that, so that's why I'm gonna put 1, means if we shoot out 2 projectile on that enemy game object, then it's gonna just lose health by 1 unit. So collision dot game object basically means right over here the game object, the projectile, the game object triggered with the projectile. So projectile just gonna trigger with this enemy game object. So collision dot game object basically means this enemy game object, and we using this dot get component in order to get the component. Basically we just going over to this enemy game object, and then we just going over to this enemy script, and then calling this take damage function from this enemy script, as you can see in our projectile script right over here. So firstly we going to enemy game object, and we using this dot get component, and the component we looking for is enemy, and then we basically going over to enemy script, and then calling this take damage function from that enemy script, and we do know what take damage function just gonna do. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as we're gonna shoot out projectile on this enemy game object, it's just gonna lose 1 unit of health every single time we shoot out the projectile. And once it loses all of his health, you will see the message in our console tab just gonna pop up once our enemy game object dies. So let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game, and let's take a look on it. So just wait a little moment, and once it's done we are ready to shoot out the projectile. So now if I shoot out, but before I do, make sure I'm gonna move over to my hierarchy, and I'm gonna select my script, and if I move over to my enemy script, we can see max health is 2. And if I shoot out the projectile, as you can see, as soon as our projectile triggered with this enemy game object, max health is become now 1. And if I shoot out one more time, as you can see max health is 0. So whenever our enemy max health reaches 0, and if we move over to our console tab, we can see the message in our console tab just getting pop up, enemy died multiple times. So if I just get out of play mode and double click on this message, we can see we just calling this type function, and when we calling it, once our max health of this enemy game object reaches 0, as you can notice right over here. So if the max health of enemy, if it's lesser than or equal to 0, if that is the case, then we calling the die function, as you can notice right over here. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And instead of printing out message, we need to destroy this enemy, but before we destroy, we're gonna show some cool effects, something like that. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. We simply printing out message in the console. So if I head over to my console tab, as you can see, enemy died message just getting pop up. Instead of printing out message, we need to destroy this enemy game object. So let's do it. So we're gonna double click on this message in order to move over to that line of code. So I want this message to be print out, so I'm gonna leave that, and after that I'm gonna destroy my player game object. To destroy, we're gonna use this destroy function, and in brackets it's gonna take the game object that we want to destroy. So we're gonna pass this dot game object, basically means enemy game object itself, and the enemy script is attached to this enemy game object. So if I select my, if I move over to hierarchy enemies and select this enemy, so enemy script is attached to this enemy game object. So this dot game object there basically means this enemy game object itself. And now let's have a look on this. So I'm gonna clear my console. Let's click on the let's click play button in the top, and let's take a look if it's working perfectly or not. So we're gonna have a look on this. and if it's working fine, then we can just show up the explosion effect as well. Sorry, we're gonna clear. So let's destroy this. So we not destroying at all, we have done some mistake. So we're gonna get out of play mode. Basically we just forgot to save our script. So I'm gonna move over to my script once again, and make sure you press down Ctrl S on your keyboard. So I'm gonna remove this comment right here and this, and let's press down. Make sure you press down Ctrl S on your keyboard, else it's not gonna work. Sorry, I'm gonna do it. Let's press down Ctrl S, and now it should be working fine. Or you can simply just move over to top left file, and then you can just save your script in Visual Studio as well. Simply the shortcut key you can use, which is Ctrl plus S, in order to save your script, as well as you can save your project by hitting Ctrl plus S on your keyboard. So just wait a little moment. Once the compilation is done, we can just see that. Sorry, let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game and have a look on this. Just wait a moment, and now if we just shoot out the projectile, as you can see, the enemy just gets destroyed as soon as it loses all of his health. And also a message in our console tab pop up says enemy died, since we just leave it already, which is which was the message that we printing out. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, and also we're gonna show an effect, explosion effect, something like that, before we destroy our enemy game object. So let's do that. So firstly I'm gonna head over to my console tab, and let's click on this clear, and let's head over to this project tab, assets, and then a sprites folder, explosion folder, and I'm gonna move over to my this one. Let's choose a perfect one. Basically I'm gonna choose any of this, and I guess this seems pretty much fine. So this one seemed perfect for me, so I'm gonna select that, go over to inspector, and let's click on this open sprite editor. Of course I will have a link in the description, you can check that out, or you can simply download all of this if you have subscription on my subscription on Patreon. So you can just grab this. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna slice individually. So move over to inspector, choose sprite mode to multiple, and pixel per unit we're gonna choose 23 or 16, something like that. And make sure you move over to filter mode and choose point no filter, since this is our pixel art. And now we're gonna click on this apply button in the bottom right, and once we done, and move over to sprite editor. In the top left you can see slice, so just click there, select automatic to create by cell count, and count how many columns and rows we have. So so 4 8 8 12, so we're gonna put 12 columns and 1 row. And now let's click on this slice and then apply in the sprite editor, and I'm going to select my game view once again, and let's go over to that sprite sheet, and let's click on this arrow in order to see the individual. So I'm going to select the first one, let's drag it over to the scene view, and I'm gonna drag this one in the top of my hierarchy so I can see all the time. And instead of calling sprite sheet 0, I'm gonna call explosion, something like that. And now we're gonna create the animation. To create it, first we're gonna select from start to the end by holding down shift, basically all of them, and then drag it top of this explosion game object in the hierarchy, so it's gonna create the animation right away. And we will place the animation in our animation folder. So in the top left we will move over to our assets. In assets we can see we have the animation folder, so we're gonna open that up by double clicking on it. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna create another subfolder, or we can just move over to this other animation. Basically create a subfolder by right click, then new, and then folder, and you can name the folder whatever you want. So I'm gonna move over to this other animation folder, and I have to name the animation, so I'm gonna call it explosion, and then click on this save button. And now if we move over to animation tab and then click on this play button, we can see the animation, but the problem is that it seems too much big. So we're going to make it a little bit small. To do so, we will head over to project tab and we will select our sprite sheet one more time, and let's go over to inspector, and pixel per unit, instead of choosing 23, we're gonna choose 32. Bigger pixel per unit number basically means this, you can simply say this sprite size just gonna be small right away. And let's scroll down and then apply, and now it's kind of bit small. We can make it even more smaller. So we're gonna do 40, and let's click on this apply button. Now if we select our explosion, move over to animation tab, then click on this play button, now this seems perfect and amazing. So this amazing. So once we are satisfied, we can just make this, or we can just turn into a prefab. But before we do, let's move over to our project tab, then assets, and then animation folder, and we will move over to our other animation subfolder, sorry, over here, and we can see the explosion animation clip is right over here. So make sure you choose that, then go over to inspector and uncheck the loop time, since we don't want this to be looped. So make sure you just uncheck the loop time of this explosion effect, and also note that you just move over to you need to move over to in that folder, in which folder you just place your animation. So in my case it was others animation subfolder. And now we're going to turn this explosion into a prefab, so we're going to have the copy, and we can just use it later once this anime game object loses all of his health. So we will select our explosion game object in the hierarchy, and let's drag it over to this prefabs folder in order to turn it into a prefab. Now we just turn it into a prefab, and now I'm gonna select my explosion in the hierarchy, and let's delete that, we don't need it, and we need once we gonna destroy our enemy. So what we will do, we will select our enemy game object, or basically we're gonna open up our anime script. So let's head over to this anime script. So we want to show up that explosion effect. So what we will do, we will go to top of our class, and we need to grab the reference of that explosion. Basically if I head over to my project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, we have the explosion right over here. So we need a reference of this, then we can just spawn it. So let's grab the reference first. So we will go to top of our class right over here, and let's make a serialized field private, and that is that explosion itself a whole game object. So that's why we need to type this game object, and we can call this one explosion prefab, or we can simply call explosion as well. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move over to Unity. So underneath our anime script, we will able to see that field, which is the explosion effect. And what we're gonna do now, instead of choosing the enemy in the hierarchy, we're gonna choose the enemy from that folder, as we earlier we just turned it into a prefab. So I'm gonna head over to my project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, and over here I'm gonna choose my enemy. So let's find the enemy from here as we turn it into a prefab. So over here we have, and if we move over to inspector, scroll down to this anime script, as you can notice explosion prefab field just appear, and it says none game object, means empty. So what we have to do, we need to drag our explosion prefab game object right over here. So I'm gonna select that, and let's drag it there. So why we haven't chosen in the hierarchy, because if we just choose any of this, so this enemy and then drag the explosion, it will only just gonna change with this enemy, not others. So that's why we just headed over to a prefab of that enemy and then drag it, and we have the reference by now, and we can just open up our script and we need to spawn that. To spawn it, let's move over to our die function, and I'm gonna do it somewhere over here. Before we destroy, we need to spawn, and to spawn we're gonna use this instantiate function, and we do know as a first argument it's gonna take the game object that we want to spawn. So in our case that will be explosion prefab, and the second thing it's gonna be the position from where we want to spawn. So we want to spawn from our enemy game object, so we're gonna pass this transform dot position. It's basically means our current position of that enemy game object. And the third thing, it's gonna take the rotation, so we will pass quaternion dot identity. It's basically means no rotation. And if we close that up with semicolon, press down Control S to save our script and then move over to Unity, we should able to see that explosion prefab just gonna spawn as soon as our enemy game object loses all of his health. And if it's then that explosion prefab just gonna spawn from our enemy current position. So let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game, and let's take a look on this. So as soon as our enemy game object just gonna loses all of his health, that explosion prefab just gonna spawn from our enemy game object current position. So if I just shoot out the, as you can see indeed, but the problem is that if we move over to hierarchy and scroll down to the bottom, we can see explosion clone, we still have it, and we can notice in the scene view as well. So after some period of time we also need to destroy this. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get out of play mode, and we need to check after how much amount of time it just completing the whole animation clip. Basically we're gonna move over to our project tab, assets, and then prefabs, and we're gonna open up the explosion prefab by double clicking on it, and let's move over to animation tab, and we can see after something around 1 second it just completing the whole animation clip, as you can see. So after this amount of time we need to destroy this explosion as well. To destroy it, what we will do, we will go, we also need to destroy that explosion effect. So we have seen earlier that after something like 0.9 second it's just completing the whole animation clip. So after that amount of time we also need to destroy that explosion effect. To do so, what we're gonna do, we're gonna open up our script over here. As you can see, we're spawning this explosion prefab at this position with no rotation. So after doing spawning it, we also need to destroy, but before we do, we're gonna store this into another game object container, because this explosion prefab itself a whole game object. So that's why we need to put it a container or a variable which should be a game object type. So we're gonna call it game object type, and we have to name the container, or where we want to store it, we have to name that. So I'm gonna call this one tame explosion. So let's call it tame explosion, and let's set equal to this. So basically what we have done, firstly we spawn it at this position with no rotation, as you can see, and after that we just taking whatever we spawn it. So we spawned this explosion prefab, and then we just taking that, and then we storing into this tame explosion, as you can see, and we setting tame explosion equal to this, as you can see right over here. Basically we storing, and now what we have to do, wherever we store it, we also need to destroy that. So to destroy, we need to use this destroy function. So as a first argument, it's gonna take the position from where we not position, basically it's gonna take the game object that we want to destroy. So we're gonna destroy this tame explosion where we store it, comma, second thing, it's gonna take the time. So as you saw that after 0.991 second, something like around 1 second, it's just completing the whole animation clip. So that's why after that amount of time we want to destroy it. So we're gonna put 0.9 F, and let's close that up with semicolon. So firstly we spawned this explosion prefab at this point with no rotation, and after that we stored it the explosion prefab into this temp explosion, or we just set equal to this as you can see. And then we also destroying this temp explosion where we just set as you can notice right over here, and we just specified the time as a second argument. Now we're gonna press down Control S on our keyboard in order to save our script, and let's move over to Unity. So after 0.9 second, you also gonna see that explosion prefab which we spawning, it's gonna destroy after 0.9 if second. So let's have a look on this. So just wait a little moment to compile the script, and once it's done we can just ready with that. So now if we click on this play button in the top, and let's have a look on this. Just wait a moment, and now we're gonna destroy 1 2 as you can see. And if we move over to hierarchy, we cannot see explosion clone in the bottom as well as in the scene view. Basically after 0.9 second it just get destroyed as you seen. We're not able to notice in the scene view as well as in the game in the hierarchy. So basically that fines. But the problem is that if I get out of play mode and then click on this play button in the top in order to play my game, you will see that explosion prefab just is spawning from wrong position, basically too much in the bottom. So we need to bring it up a little bit. So let me show you. So if I just destroy this, as you can see, it's spawning from somewhere over here, but we want to spawn from the feet of our enemy game object. So what we will do for it, we're gonna get out of play mode and let's create a point for it. So I'm gonna head over to my hierarchy, then enemies, and I'm gonna select this enemy, and let's delete this one basically. So this enemy, so I'm gonna create a point and we're gonna drag it up somewhere over here because we want to spawn that spawn effect somewhere over here, so it's gonna be perfect. So that is the reason. So we will select our first enemy, let's right click on it, let's create an empty child game object, and we can call this game object to something like explosion. Let's call it explosion point or position explosion point. And let's select the move tool from the scene view and let's move it up somewhere around here. And we're gonna move over to inspector, click here, and we're gonna choose an gizmos for it. I'm gonna choose another color gizmos, something like this. So this is our explosion point. So we need a reference of this point, basically position, then we can just spawn it. So let's grab the position and after that we're gonna spawn it. So let's open up our anime script and let's go to top of our class and let's make another serialized field private, and this will be position. So for position we need to type transform, which is responsible for position, rotation, and scale, and we can call this one explosion point point, and then close that up with semicolon. And make sure once you move over to Unity editor you assign this variable. And now I'm gonna move over to down, basically where enemy is dying. So we spawning that explosion prefab, as you can see, transform dot position, basically center position of our enemy game object. Instead of spawning that, we're gonna spawn it from explosion point as we created. So that's why we're gonna remove this. Instead of spawning from transform dot position, basically center position of that enemy game object, we're gonna spawn it from this explosion point, and we're gonna access the position, so dot position, and make sure you assign it. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as our script just gonna compile, we will able to notice underneath our enemy script and another field just gonna pop up with which will be explosion point. So we need to assign that as well. So just wait a moment, and now we can see as soon as our anime script compiles, we can see that explosion point and it says none transform. So we're gonna take our explosion point from this anime game object and let's drag it there, and now this is fine. And make sure if you turn it this anime into a prefab, then make sure you go over to inspector overrides and then apply all. And now it's done, and let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game, and let's have a look on this. So we should able to notice that that explosion effect just gonna spawn from perfect position. So let me show you. So now if we shoot out, now as you saw, it's spawning somewhere over here. So we can drag a little bit explosion point to the down direction. So let's do it. So we're gonna get out of play mode and let's select this. Basically we gonna select our explosion point and let's drag it a little bit down, and now it's done. Let's go to overrides and then apply all. Let's click on this play button in the top one more time, and let's take a look on this. So now if we shoot out, now this is perfect as you saw. And we also want more effect that once our projectile collide with that enemy game object, we just want to show a hit effect as well. To do that, we're gonna get out of play mode. Let's do it. For that, I will move over to my project tab, and then I'm gonna move over to my assets folder, then a sprites folder, then this explosion folder. So I have it here as you can see. So let's select the sprite sheet. Let's go over to inspector, click on open sprite editor. As you can notice, we have this. So make sure you choose a sprite mode to multiple in the inspector and filter mode to point no filter, and after doing that click on this apply button in the bottom right and move over to this sprite editor tab. In the top left you can see slice, so just click there, select automatic to create by cell count and count how many columns and rows it has. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 columns, so we're gonna put 8 columns. Let's put 8 columns and 1 row. Let's click on slice and then click on this apply button in the sprite in the top right in sprite editor tab. And now I'm gonna select the game view once again, and let's click on this arrow into that sprite sheet and let's select the first one. Let's drag it over to the scene view or into hierarchy as well. I'm gonna move it over here in order to make this one visible somewhere over here. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select this. Let's drag it in the top so I can see all the time in the hierarchy, and let's call it, instead of calling sprite sheet underscore 0, we're gonna call this hit effect. So let's call it hit effect. And what we need to do, we need to make the animation. So let's select all of the sprite by holding down shift key. Make sure you select all of them in order to make the animation, and we're gonna drag it top of this hit effect game object in the hierarchy in order to make the animation right away. So we will move over to assets in the top left. In assets we already created this animation folder, so let's open that up by double clicking on it, and this will be other animation. So we're gonna place it into this folder, and we have to name the animation what we want. So this will be the hit effect, so I'm gonna call this hit underscore effect, something like that, and let's click on this save button. And if I choose my hit effect in the hierarchy, move over to animation tab and then click on this play button, as you can see it's playing the animation perfectly. So now that's pretty much fine. And what we have to do now, I don't want this animation clip to be low, so that's why I'm gonna move over to my project tab, then basically assets, and then I'm gonna move over to I'm gonna move over to my animation folder, then other animation, and I can see the hit effect animation clip right over here. So let's choose that and then go over to inspector, and I'm going to uncheck the loop time, so the animation will not be loop. and I will add some components to this heat effect. So what I'm gonna do, firstly I'm gonna attach a circle collider 2D for collision detection, and we are gonna also add a rigid body 2D for gravity. Basically we don't want gravity, so we're gonna set the gravity scale to 0, or we can set it to kinematic. So let's do it. So let's choose the heat effect game object in the hierarchy. Let's go over to inspector. Let's click on this add component. So first thing, I'm gonna add a rigid body 2D, and let's set the gravity body type to kinematic, so it's not gonna fall down due to our gravity. And collision detection, I'm gonna choose continuous. And let's add one more component. So let's click on this add component, and we're gonna add a circle collider 2D, circle collider 2D, and we're gonna make the size of it as the size of this sprite. So we're gonna decrease the radius something around 0.2. 0.2 seems perfect number, and make sure you just go to is trigger and check this one, and check this one is triggered to true. And now this is fine, and I guess this is fine, and we can call this one heat effect game. We can assign this heat effect game object with a heat effect tag. So we will go over to inspector, click on untag, let's click on add tag, and let's click on this plus icon, and we have to name the tag. So I'm gonna call heat effect. So let's call it heat effect. Let's click on save, and make sure you select your heat effect game object one more time in the hierarchy. Go over to inspector, and we're gonna assign with heat effect. Now we assigned this heat effect as a heat effect tag. So let's turn this heat effect into a prefab, and we're gonna remove it from the scene view. We only gonna spawn once our projectile collide with this enemy game object. From there we gonna spawn it. So let's select our heat effect in the hierarchy, and let's drag it over to this prefabs folder in order to turn it into a prefab. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna choose our heat effect in the hierarchy, and let's delete that. Instead we're gonna spawn it once our enemy game object taking damage, so we're gonna spawn there. So what we will do for it, let's open up our enemy script. So I'm gonna choose this enemy. Let's open that up by double clicking on it, and for that we're gonna use on trigger enter 2D function, because that function get called when we trigger with something. So let's make it somewhere over here. So we need to use this on trigger enter, on trigger enter 2D function. So this function get called when we trigger with something, and we can extract information about what we trigger it with by going over to this collision parameter. So what we're gonna do, whatever we trigger it with, if that game object has a tag called yes, basically we need to has a tag called bullet. Bullet basically, if we move over to Unity, so we need to assign that projectile as a projectile prefab. So basically if I move over to my project tab, then prefabs, and and let's open up this projectile. So we can see this projectile we just untagged. So we're gonna assign this projectile as a bullet player projectile, something like that. So let's select this projectile in the hierarchy, sorry, not in the hierarchy, from that folder, prefab folder. Go over to inspector, click on untag, and then click on this add tag in the inspector. Click on this plus icon, and we're gonna name this projectile as the name of that game object or that prefab. And now we're gonna choose our projectile one more time from that folder. Go over to inspector, and we're gonna tag that, we're gonna assign it with projectile. And now we assigned this projectile as a projectile tag, and we will move over to our script. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna check if that, so if, let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. So what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if we trigger it with this projectile, then we do know that we just are taking damage. So what we need to do, we need to spawn that heat effect. But before we do, let's have a look. So we're gonna use this collision. So let's type this collision, collision dot game object dot tag, and if the tag is equals to our projectile, if that is the case, and make sure you spelling it correct inside this quotation, else it's not gonna work. So collision.gameObject.tag, basically collision.gameObject over here basically means the game object we trigger it with. So we definitely gonna trigger with this projectile once it's gonna spawn from, or it's gonna shoot out from this player game object, and just gonna trigger with this enemy game object. So which collision.game object over here basically means that projectile game object, and we accessing the tag of that game object, and we checking if it's equals to projectile, means we just triggering with that projectile. So now what we have to do, we need to spawn that heat effect. We need to spawn that heat effect. So what we can simply do right over here, we can type for now let's print out a message, something says then something like debug.log. For printing out message, let's say spawn heat effect. So let's print out this message, spawn heat effect, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as we're gonna trigger with that projectile, the message should be pop up in our console tab, says spawn heat effect. So just wait a moment, and once it's done we can just spawn it. So just wait a moment and it should be work fine. So now if I select my console tab and then click on this play button in the top in order to play the game, let's take a look on this. So as soon as we're gonna trigger with that spawn, we should notice that. So now, sorry. So as you can see, as soon as projectile is getting triggered with that enemy game object, if we move over to our console tab, we can see spawn heat effect message just getting pop up. Instead of printing out message, we just want to show that heat effect. So let's get out of play mode. What we will do for that, firstly we need a reference of this heat effect. So if I choose my heat effect over here, so we need a reference of this, then we can spawn it. And also so let's do that basically first. So let's go over to our script and let's go to top of our class and let's grab the reference. So we're gonna make another serialized field private, and that heat effect itself a whole game object. So we're gonna type this game object, and we can call this one heat effect prefab. So let's call like that, and that is fine. And we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and make sure you just go to Unity and then assign it, basically drag your heat effect to heat effect field. And to spawn that, we need to basically we're gonna move over to this take damage function over here. As you can see, we taking damage. So after taking damage, we want to spawn it. To spawn, we do know we're gonna use this instantiate function, and this function as a first argument, it's gonna take the game object that we want to spawn. So in our case, that will be heat effect prefab. And the second thing, it's gonna take the position from where we want to spawn it. Oh, sorry, instead of doing this over here, sorry, when we sorry, really sorry, we're gonna do it over here. As you can see, I'm really apologize, we're doing it here. We can do that here as well. So instead of printing out message, we're gonna spawn it. So we will use this instantiate function. So for as a first argument, it's gonna take the game object that we want to spawn. So we're gonna pass our heat effect prefab, and the second thing, it's gonna take the position. So we're gonna pass this collision dot game object dot position, sorry, transform dot position. So firstly, what we're doing, basically we're just going over to collision dot game object, basically means that projectile game object, and then accessing the transform of it, and then accessing the position. So we just spawning that this heat effect prefab at the position where our projectile collide. or you can simply say projectile center position. So collision dot game object dot transform dot position basically means center position of that projectile prefab. And the third argument, it's gonna take the rotation, so we will pass quaternion dot identity. It's basically means no rotation, and let's close that up with semicolon. But we do know that when we're gonna spawn this heat effect, we also need to destroy after some period of time. But before we destroy, we need to check. So if we move over to Unity and then open up this heat effect by double clicking on it and move over to animation tab, we can see after something like 0.6 second, it's just completing the whole animation clip. So after this amount of time, we also need to destroy this heat effect itself. So let's go over to inspector. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna spawn this heat effect at this position with no rotation. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna store it into another game object variable, game object, and we can call this one temp heat effect. Basically we're doing the same thing as we have done once we spawning that explosion effect as you saw earlier. So now what we're gonna do now, we also need to destroy this temp effect. So basically we spawn it, and after spawning we just storing that heat effect into this temp heat effect container or variable. So we also need to destroy this temp heat effect. So to destroy, we're gonna use this destroy function. As a first argument, it's gonna take the game object, so we're gonna pass our temp heat effect, basically the container, comma. Second thing, it's gonna take the time, so we're gonna put 0.68, and let's close that up with semicolon. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our skip, and now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as that projectile just gonna trigger with that enemy game object, you will able to see that heat effect just gonna spawn right away. So just wait a moment, and once it's done, we can just notice it. So just wait a moment for compiling, and we need to go back in scene view. To go back, we will move over to hierarchy, so we can see back arrow. So let's click there in order to go back in scene view, and now this is done. But make sure you select your enemy game object, and we can see underneath our enemy script heat effect prefab, and it says non game object. Basically we need to drag the heat effect over here, so we're gonna have the reference, and then we can simply spawn it. So we will move over to our project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, and let's select this heat effect, and let's drag it over to this field. Now we can have see that we have the heat effect. So let's see. So let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game. So just wait a moment, and as soon as projectile just gonna trigger with this enemy game object, that heat effect just gonna spawn from where it's collided. So we can see that heat effect just is spawning. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, and we can just add a little bit offset as well. So what we will do, we will open up our enemy script, and let's create a vector 3. So we will go to top of our class, and we're gonna create a vector 3. So let's type serialized field private, this will be a vector 3, and we can call this one offset. So let's call it offset, and let's close that up with semicolon. So this vector 3 just gonna have x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis we do know. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna move over to our heat effect, basically where we're spawning, over here. So this is our current position of that projectile. So this has x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis. So top of that, we will add the offset to spawn that heat effect in perfect position, you can simply say. So top of our position, we're gonna add this offset, and now we will set the variable in the inspector. So that's why I didn't set equal to something like a new vector 3 like that. So we just added the offset, as you can see. So collision dot game object dot transform dot position basically means current position of that projectile prefab, and top of that we just added the offset which gonna have, and this offset is a vector 3 variable which gonna have x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis Also this position right over here gonna have x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis. Or you can, what you can simply do, you can just use this new vector 3 vector 3 which gonna have x axis comma y axis comma z axis. So we can just play around with the x axis. Basically we can add a little something like 0.1 f or 0.2 f, something like that. But instead of doing that, we already created the offset. So we will top of this, we're gonna add the offset. So in order to spawn our hit effect in a perfect position. And if you just a little bit confused, then you can just skip this part as well. You can understand it. Basically it's a little bit simple. So now I'm gonna press down Ctrl S to save my script, and let's move over to Unity. So underneath our anime script we will see a vector 3 variable just gonna pop up, and it's gonna have x-axis and y-axis and the z-axis. So we're gonna work with x-axis. Basically we just want to add a little bit offset in the x-axis. So we can see as soon as our anime script compiles, we can see offset. It has x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis. So top of our current position of that projectile, we're gonna add something like 0.1 f unit, 1f, something like that. And we're not gonna do it all in the y or z, so we're gonna leave it to 0 0. So now let's have a look. So let's click on this play button. So we have done this thing offset. Basically we just added the offset to spawn that hit effect from perfect position. So that's why we just added in the x-axis, which is 0.15. So now let's have a look. If I spawn, as you can see, this working fine. And I'm gonna get out of play mode, and make sure you select your parent game object, then go over to inspector, overrides, and then apply all if you turn it your game object into a prefab. So what we gonna do now, I'm gonna increase the max health of this anime game object something around 10 in order to test it. For testing purposes I'm just doing it, you can just skip that. So let's click on this play button one more time in the top in order to play our game, and let's take a look on this. It should be fine, and we can play around with the y offset as well. So just wait a moment. So now if we just try to hit, we can see this seems pretty much fine. So that's pretty much cool. So what we want to do in the y, we just want a little bit up. So what we will do, we will get out of play mode, and we will move over to our anime script, and in the y we're gonna put something like 0.2, 0.2, something like that. And now if we go ahead and then play the game, you will see in the y that explosion effect just gonna spawn a little bit up, because in the y we just put 0.2, and we just adding this top of our current position of that projectile. So let's have a look on this now. So we can see in the up. So now as you can see, indeed in the y we can see right over here we that spawning, because we just added in the y. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, and this seems perfect and cool. And we also need to shake our camera, so it's gonna be perfect. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, and make sure you press down Ctrl S on your keyboard in order to save whatever you have done in Unity editor. It will be saved right away. Once our player game object jumps, we wanna show some dust or something like that. We're gonna show that up, some dust particle. So what will do, I'm gonna move over to my project tab, assets, and then a sprites folder, and I will head over to my dust folder. As you can see, of course I will have a link in the description of this, you can go and check that out. So we will select all of them by holding down shift and go over to inspector, and sprite mode 2 we're gonna choose single, since this is single sprites as you can see. And pixel per unit we're gonna make it something around 16 we can do. So let's do it. And to get rid of blurry, we will choose filter mode to point of filter, and let's click on this apply button. So now we're gonna select the first one. Let's select that and drag it over to this scene view or in this hierarchy. So I'm gonna drag it somewhere around here, and let's call it dust. But before I call it, I'm gonna drag it in the top of my hierarchy so I can see all the time. And let's rename it to dust particle, or let's call it simply dust. And we need to make the animation. So to make the animation, we're gonna select all of the sprite, and let's drag it over to dust game object, atop of this dust game object in the hierarchy. And we have to name the animation, but before we name it, let's place it into assets, animation, other animation, and we will call this animation to something like dust, something like that. And let's click on save. And now if we select our dust and go over to animation tab and then click on this play button, as you can see, it's playing the dust effect over again and again. So this seems pretty much cool. So what we're gonna do now, and also we don't want this animation clip to be loop, so we will head over to our assets, then animation, other animation. So we simply just moving over to where we place it the animation. So in my case, this other underscore animation subfolder, and we can see the dust animation clip right over here. And let's go over to inspector, and we're gonna uncheck this loop time so the animation will not be loop. And let's make this dust a prefab, so we will have the copy, and we're gonna destroy it in the hierarchy, and we need it once we're gonna jump from this, you can simply say from this ground. So let's select our dust and let's turn it into a prefab. So we're gonna drag it over to this prefabs folder in order to turn it into a prefab. And now let's choose our dust and let's delete it from the hierarchy for now. And what we need to do now, we basically need to spawn once our player game object jump off from this ground. At that moment we're gonna show that up, and we will show that up in this feet of this player game object as something over here once it's jumped from this ground. So to do that, we will open up our player script. So firstly we need to grab the reference of it. So we will open up our player script by double clicking on it, or we can simply create another script for it to keep our project a little bit clean. So let's do it instead of doing inside this player script. So we will move over to our project tab, assets, and then we will head over to our script folder. Let's right click, create, and then scripting, and we're gonna click on this mono behavior script. And I'm gonna call this script to something like player 2, since we already have player script, so that's why. And now we're gonna open up this player 2 script by double clicking on it, and we need to attach this player 2 script as well to our player game object. So after that we can do all of those things. So just wait a moment, it's gonna take few seconds to compile our script, and once it's done we can just move over to Unity and we can just add up the script to our player game object. So we just created another script to keep the project clean, so that is the main reason. So just wait a little moment, and once it's done we have to attach our script. So now it's done. So let's select our player game object in the hierarchy, and let's select the player 2 script and let's drag it over to this add component section. And we're gonna open up our player 2 script by now by double clicking on it. And what we will do, we will remove this start and update function we don't need. Instead we will use this call on collision. Sorry, we need to include use this function. It's called on collision exit 2d. So this function right over here, or collision exit 2d, get called when we exit out from a collision. Let's suppose this player jump off from this ground, so it's gonna exit out from this ground, or from this collision, from this ground collision. So that's so right over here this function just gonna trigger. So this function get called when we trigger out from any collider, and we can extract information by this collision parameter. So what we want to do over here, we just want to check if we exit out from our ground, if it's or not. So to do that, but make sure before you do, you assign this ground tile or this ground as a ground tag by moving over to inspector, clicking over here, clicking add tag, and assign as we have done earlier. So you can just follow that process. So now I'm gonna move over to my script. So over here we will check. So let's make if condition, some first bracket and some curly brackets. And what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if collision dot game object dot tag, if it's equals to ground. If that is the case, means we just go exiting out from our ground. So basically we jumping off from this ground. So this function right over here just gonna trigger, and we're checking if we're triggering out from that ground or not. So collision dot game object basically means the game object we triggered it out, so we definitely gonna trigger out from this ground. So collision dot game object there basically means this ground, and after that what we doing, we just accessing the tag of it. So this ground we assign it. So if I move over to my hierarchy, then create and select this ground tile and move over to inspector in the right, we can see tag we just assign it as a ground. So basically we assign it this ground as a ground tag, and over here we checking if the tag is equals to ground. So it's definitely gonna be ground. So what we want to do for now, let's print out a message something like show particle effect or show dust effect, something like that, it's working or not. So to do that, we're gonna type debug.log and let's say something like spawn dust, something like that, spawn dust, and let's close that up with semicolon and control S to save our script in order to save our script. And this is fine. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as we're gonna jump off from this ground, basically we just gonna exit this collision, this ground collision, ground collider, not collision, ground collider, we will able to notice that message just gonna pop up since we assign it this ground as a ground tag. So we're gonna select our console tab in order to see the message, and now let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game. And now let's have a look on this. It should be work fine. So just wait a little moment. So now let's collide with this ground. So if I just press down space key, as you can see, as soon as we press down space key, we jump it off from this ground, and the message just gets pop up in our console tab, says spawn dust. As you can notice, as soon as we just triggering out from this ground collider. So instead of printing out message, we're gonna show that effect as you saw earlier. So we will get out of play mode, and let's double click on this message in order to move over to that line of code. But before we do, we need a reference of this dust. Basically we need this dust game object, and we have it over here. So we need a reference of this, then we can just spawn it, and also we need a reference of a position. So we're gonna do it bottom of this player game object. So if I select my player in the hierarchy, we can see we added a ground checkpoint to this player game object. If you haven't, then just right click on this player game object, then create an empty child game object and move it in the bottom, because we also need the position from where we want to spawn it and the dust effect that we want to spawn. So let's open up our script and let's go to top of our class and let's grab the reference. So let's make a serialized field private, and this will be game object, basically that dust effect, and we can call this one dust prefab. So let's call it dust prefab. And the second thing, we need the position from where we want to spawn. So let's make another serialized field private, and this will be transform, basically a position, and we can call this spawn position. Let's call it spawn pose or position, or let's call it simply spawn point. And let's close that up with semicolon, control S to save your script and move over to Unity. So we need to assign this variable one by one. So first thing, just gonna pop up our dust prefab. So what we have to do there, we basically need to select our dust prefab and then we have to drag it there. So we will have the reference as well as the ground checkpoint from where we want to spawn it. So as you can see, as soon as our player script compiles, underneath our player 2 script we can see dust prefab and it says none game object. So we will select our dust, let's drag it over to this dust prefab slot, and we will select our ground checkpoint and let's drag it over to this spawn point, basically where we want to spawn. Now we have the position as well as the dust and we are ready to spawn it. So let's double click on this to in order to open this up. So instead of printing out message, we just want to spawn it, and in order to spawn, we do know we need to use this instantiate function. And this instantiate function, as a first argument, it's gonna take the game object that we want to spawn. So in our case it will be dust prefab, and the second thing, it's gonna take the position from where we want to spawn it. So we're gonna type this spawn point dot position. So in our case we assign it that ground checkpoint as you've seen. And the third thing, it's gonna take the rotation. So we're not gonna rotate like that, so we just gonna pass quaternion dot identity, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we will press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as we're gonna leave this ground, or just gonna jump off from this ground, you will see that dust effect just gonna spawn from this ground checkpoint since we just doing. And if you just want to add a offset, you can do that as well. So now let's have a look before we do it. So if I just go ahead and then click on this play button in the top and try to jump off from this ground, you will see that dust just gonna spawn from bottom of from bottom feet of this player game object, or from that ground checkpoint as you've seen. So now if I press down space key, and the problem is that we not spawning. Basically dust is behind of our player. We need to drag it in front of this player game object. So if I select my dust, we have the dust and it's spawning over here. So basically what we have to do, we just gonna create a point somewhere around here. So if I select my dust clone and then select this move tool in the scene view, and we move it up, so we can see, okay, so we got it. So we're gonna create a point. So instead of spawning from this ground check, we're gonna spawn it something over here so we can see the dust effect. So let's get out of play mode and let's create another point for that basically. So we will select our player, let's right click on it, and let's create another empty child game object, and we can call this game object something like dust point. Let's call it instead dust dust spawn point or position, dust spawn point or position. And let's move this one up here, and I'm gonna move over to inspector, then click over here, and I'm gonna choose an icon for it. So from this point I want to spawn, so that's why in my player 2 script I'm gonna replace this ground checkpoint with this dust spawn point, so we can see that. Or you can simply add up the offset as well, but I'm gonna talk it about later. Let's do it now. And before I do it, I'm gonna move over to my inspector, overrides, and then apply all. So the changes I made over here, it's gonna be saved. So let's click on this play button in the top by now. It should be fine. If it's not, then we can just adjust as well by just adding the offset. So just wait a moment. So let's wait. And now if we jump, as you can see, indeed it's playing that animation clip. But the problem is that dust is not destroying itself after playing the whole animation clip. And if we move over to hierarchy, we can see we still have all of this dust clone. So we need to destroy after playing those animation clip perfectly. So what we will do for it, we will get out of play mode. And before we do, let's open up that dust prefab game object. So firstly we will head over to our project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, and let's double click on this dust game object in order to open that up in prefab mode, as you can see. So what we want, so if we select our dust and move over to animation tab, we can see after like 0.3 second it's just completing the whole animation clip. I guess 0.31, just not 0.3, it's gonna be 0.3 I guess. So something like 0.25, it's just completing the whole animation clip. So after this amount of time we need to destroy this dust as well. So let's go back and let's open up our script one more time. And So firstly, we spawning this dust prefab at this position with no rotation, and after spawning, we gonna store that dust effect, that dust prefab that we store spawned. We're gonna store it another game object container, and we can call this one temp dust or temporary dust, and let's set equal to this. Basically, we just taking the dust prefab that we spawn it at this position with no rotation. We just taking that and then storing into this temp dust. As you can see, temp dust variable, we type game object type because this dust prefab itself a whole game object, so that's why we need to type a same variable type. And so we also need to destroy this temp dust after some period of time. So to destroy that, we're gonna use destroy function. Basically, we're doing the same thing as we have done with explosion and the heat effect. So basically the same procedure. So for we're gonna destroy this temp dust where we store it. Second thing, we can specify the time, which was something like 0.25 if, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Control S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity, and it should be fine. So now it should be fine. Just wait a moment, and once it's done, we can just see that. So now it's fine, and I do have a dust, this dust, sorry. Okay, so just forget this about it. So now what we're gonna do, where we have the player here, so let's click on this play button. By now it should be work fine. So after basically 0.25 second, the dust effect just gonna destroy itself. Firstly, we storing that, and after storing, we just destroying. So let's have a look on this. So now if we jump, as you can see, indeed the dust effect is spawning, but the problem is that dust is spawning in the air. Instead of spawning in the air, we're gonna spawn it feet of this player game object. So what we can simply do, we can simply drag it a little bit down, this explosion this dust spawn point a little bit down. Or what else we can do, we can just add the offset, but let's talk about the offset later. Let's bring it down a little bit. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, and I will select my player game object in the hierarchy, and let's click over here, and let's select our dust point, and let's press down F in order to focus on it, and we're gonna drag it a little bit down somewhere around here. And make sure you just go to overrides and apply all if you turn it your player game object into a prefab. So make sure you just do it. And now if we go ahead and then click on this play button, it should be work fine by now. Or what else you can do, you can also create an offset as well. So just wait a moment, and by now if we just jump, we can see the dust effect is spawning perfectly by now, as you can notice right over here. And also the dust effect just getting destroyed after 0.25 second, as you can see. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And let's talk about the let's talk about the offset. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. To work with offset, what we can simply do, we can simply drag up this explosion point, and we can create a vector 3 which gonna have x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis. And we will add top of this dust point, and the y we can just add some little amount, so it's gonna be down somewhere around here. So what we gonna simply do, we will open up our player 2 script, and we will create a vector 3 parameter. So we will go to top of our class, and we're gonna create another serialized field private, and this will be a vector 3. And we do know that this vector 3 just gonna have x-axis and y-axis. So we can simply call this one offset. And what we can simply do, we can simply add top of our spawn point position. Basically, we can just add top of this spawn point that we created, top of this, and we can just play around with the value. So we can just adjust the y value something over here. If we let's suppose we just want to be down, then we can just add up minus some amount in the y, so it's gonna be down somewhere around here. So basically that is the thing. So top of our spawn point position, we're gonna add our offset, and make sure this offset is a vector 3 parameter. Why? Because this spawn point is also a vector 3 parameter which has x-axis, y-axis and the z-axis, as we know those things. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our skip, and let's move over to Unity. And underneath our player 2 script, we should able to see that vector 3 parameter which is offset, and we can just put minus some value to bring down our spawn point somewhere over here. So this position just gonna be our is position where our does just gonna spawn. So in the offset y, as you can see, we're not gonna work in the x, so it will be 0. We're not gonna play in the x and the z, we're just gonna leave it. But we need to do we do need to work in the y. Basically we need to bring it down a little bit somewhere around here. So top of this spawn point, we're just gonna add up some minus value to bring it down. So why we putting minus? So minus will be negative, basically down, so that's why. So we can simply put minus point we can do minus 0.2, something like that. And now if we go ahead and then click on this play button, you will see. So I just told you about this offset. You can just use this logic to anywhere in the game, so it would be fine. And basically try different things and it's gonna be awesome. So if I press down, as you can see, it is spawning somewhere around here. So we can simply do minus 0.8. So if we spawn, as you can see, minus 0.8 is perfect number. So we can put something like minus 0.75, and minus 0.75 also a great number. So so our dust basically spawning somewhere around here. So top of this spawn point, we just added this offset and we just play it around the y, and we put minus because we basically need to drag it down, so that's why I put minus. And we just put it minus 0.75, or we can put minus 0.7 is also. So minus 7 seems perfect number. Basically top of our spawn dust point, we just added this offset. So and we just put minus to bring it down. And let's suppose you just want to spawn it to the top, then you can just put positive number like 0.7 instead of minus 0.7. So I hope you get the idea that how you can just add up offset. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, or you can simply just play around with this spawn point, does spawn point as well. It's basically totally up to you. So I'm gonna move over to my inspector overrides and then apply all. But before I do, make sure you get out of play mode and remember the number. So the number was minus 0.7, minus 0.7. So make sure you just do that, and once you're done, go to inspector overrides and then apply all. And I'm gonna press down Ctrl S on my keyboard in order to save my project. We will install Cinemachine Camera in order to make the follow as well as the parallax effect, and also about camera shake. So before we do it, we will select our main camera in the hierarchy, and let's remove the follow script from here. We don't want to follow with our main camera, we're gonna do with Cinemachine, so that's why. So I'm gonna select my main camera in the hierarchy. Let's go over to inspector, follow script, let's right click on it and let's click on this remove component, and now it's removed. And if we just click if basically if we play our game, you will see the camera not gonna move at all in the direction player is going. So to do that, we're gonna do with our Cinemachine. So as you can see, we can move left and right, but the camera is not following at all. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna get out of play mode, and for it we will install Cinemachine. To install Cinemachine, what we have to do, we need to head over window in the top and then move over to package manager in the bottom. You can see right over here, so just click there, and in the left bar you will see Unity registry, my assets built in. So select this Unity registry and type right over here Cinemachine. So you can type Cinemachine and it's gonna pop up, and also you can basically scroll down and you can find in the bottom Cinemachine. So right over I already installed it, so you're gonna see a install button right over here. So just click on install and then click on import, so it will add to your project the Cinemachine. And once we are done, we can simply cut this tab, and to create our Cinemachine camera we will head over to hierarchy. Let's right click or hit this plus icon, then go over to camera. So sorry, not camera, basically we need to move over to this Cinemachine, then target is camera and then click on this 2D camera. And now as soon as we create it, we can see our Cinemachine in the bottom. And if we select our main camera, we can see that a Cinemachine brain component just added up to this main camera. Basically this component added up, basically our Cinemachine camera just gonna give instruction to our camera what to do. So that's why Cinemachine brain just added to this main camera. So basically this Cinemachine camera just gonna give instruction to this main camera what it's actually need to do. So what we want to follow our player game object. So what we will do, we will select our Cinemachine camera, but before I do, I'm going to drag it in the top so I can see all the time. And to follow our player, if we go to, select this Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, move over to inspector, Cinemachine camera, and then tracking target. As you can see, it says none transform, basically empty. So we want to follow our player, so that's why we will select our player in the hierarchy, then drag it over to this tracking target slot. And as soon as we drag it, we can see by now it's gonna follow our player. So I'm gonna move a little bit down my player. So let's select the player in the hierarchy, and let's select the move tool from the scene view, and let's move it down somewhere around here. And if we go ahead and then click on this play button in the top, you will see the camera just gonna start following our player in the direction player is going, to the left or right direction. So before we do, let's have a look on this. So now if we try to move the left and right, as you can see, indeed our main camera main camera is following our player game object. Why? Because this Cinemachine camera right over here in the inspector is just giving a main camera to basically what it's actually need to do. So that's why Cinemachine brain component is added up to this main camera. So our Cinemachine camera can just give instruction to this main camera. So we need to adjust some things. So if I select my Cinemachine camera, go over to inspector, then go over to this Cinemachine position composite, I guess, this component, and we can play around with this variable. So we can offset a little bit. So I want the main camera a little bit up. So what we can simply do, we can simply move over to this target offset in the Y. We can put some 1. So as you can see, as soon as we put 1, it just moves a little bit up, and we can play around with this state zone and all of these things. All of these things, like if you see a green outline, a blue outline, let's suppose around this area you don't want to follow your player, and once this area, basically in the scene view, once our player game object surpass that area, that we that basically main camera need to follow. So what we can do, we can just move over to this dead zone. We can check this, and as soon as we check, we can see an area just pop up. So this area, it's not once we are in this area, main camera is not following, but once we surpass this area, now camera started following our player game object. So we can just decrease or increase this value. So we can move over to this dead zone, and we can make the size something like 0.1 to make it a little bit small. In the Y we can do as well 0.1. In the Y I'm gonna do something like 2, or let's do it 5. I don't want this main camera to up in the up direction, so that's why. So we can play around with this size. and this settings as you have done inside this play mode, it's not gonna be saved at all. So once we're gonna get out of play mode, these variables, it's just gonna reset to default. So what we're gonna do for it, we will copy this component. So we're gonna right click on this Cinemachine position compose, I guess this basically this, we can right click on it and let's click on this copy component so we can remember. And if we get out of play mode, we will see this just sets back. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna paste those properties. So we're gonna right click on this component one more time and let's click on this paste component values. And as soon as we done, as you can see now, it's fine. And you can play around with this, just mess around right over here, Cinemachine position composite, I guess I don't know the full form it. Let's click on this properties composer, sorry, Cinemachine position composer. So you can play around with these values and you're gonna get it. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And we're gonna make the parallax effect by now. So if we just go ahead and then hit this play button in the top, we're not able to see our parallax effect, and we do want our parallax effect inside our game. So let me show you first before we do it. We can see parallax effects, it's not doing at all, so we will get out of play mode. In order to add parallax effect, firstly we need to do one thing. So we need to select our main camera in the hierarchy, then go over to inspector, camera component, and over there projection to choose or orthographic. From this orthographic, choose this perspective. And once you have chosen perspective, then what you need to do, you need to adjust these backgrounds. So basically we need to move our background a little bit far away from this main camera, so we will able to notice our parallax. So in the top, in the scene view, in the top bar, you can see 2D. So just click there and you can hold down alt and you can use your mouse in order to move this like this, as you can see. So what we're gonna do, we already made the parallax, I guess. So we will head over to our hierarchy, then we're gonna move over to backgrounds, and then we're gonna select this BG2. So if you just drag away any background far from this main camera, then it's gonna seems like it's moving slowly as compared to the close one. Basically this, if I just bring my BG2 a little bit up, sorry, I'm gonna drag it BG2 somewhere around here and BG1 a little bit up, something like this, and this seems pretty much cool. I'm gonna drag it a bit. So you need to play around with the Z axis. So I'm gonna select my BG1 underneath my backgrounds in the hierarchy. Let's go over to inspector, then position in the Z. I'm gonna make something like 2, and as well as I'm gonna select my BG2 and let's drag it over here, and we're gonna drag it something around 5. So now this seems pretty much cool, and you can hold down alt and you can move your mouse in order to take a look around of it, as you can see. And once you are satisfied, then you can just go over to top bar in the scene view and then click on this 2D in order to just move over to 2D mode. Now this seems, make sure you just do it. Firstly you need to select your main camera in the hierarchy and go over to this camera component in the inspector, and projection, it will be orthographic, so make sure you choose this perspective. And once you have chosen, just drag those background in the Z axis, just mess around with it to get the parallax effect. And if you drag a background far from this main camera, means that background just gonna move slowly as compared to the close one, so make sure. And I just want a zoom out a little bit. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select my Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, then go over to inspector, and then Cinemachine camera component, and we can play around with this lens. So we can zoom out something like this much I want, which is I guess 64. 64 is great. And now if the 64 is great, and if I just go ahead and then click on this play button, it should work fine. So once we are done, we are ready to go. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. and also we need to make that a camera shake as well. So if I now try to move left and right, as you can see, we can able to notice our parallax effect, a parallax effects. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, and we can make the double jump. As you can see, I guess we need to make it a little bit up our double jump, and I'm gonna drag a coin somewhere around here. So let's get out of play mode, and I will head over to my project tab, then assets, and I will move over to my prefabs folder, and let's select this coin and let's drag it over to this scene view somewhere around here. And I'm gonna make my player jump a little bit high, so I will select my player in the hierarchy, and let's move over to this player script in the inspector, and jump height I'm gonna make, so we have it over here, so I'm gonna make it something around 14. And if we go ahead and then click on this play button in the top, in order to start our game, so let's have a look on this. So we should able to see our player just gonna jump a little bit high by now. Let's have a look on this. So if we jump, we can see it's now just doing, but the problem is that the camera is just basically kind of bit weird. So basically what we need to do, we're gonna get out of play mode, we need to play around with the depth width zone. Basically I will move over to my Cinemachine camera, then go over to inspector and scroll down to this Cinemachine position composer component, and dead zone in the Y I'm gonna make it something around 10. So it's gonna not gonna happen 10, or we can simply move do it a little bit high, something like 20. Sorry, dead zone we're gonna make it 20. So 20 seems pretty much cool. And if we just go ahead and then click on this play button in the top, it should work fine. It's not gonna give us weird, you can say, weird camera movement. So let's have a look on this. So if we jump in the y-axis, now it's not happening at all. So this seems pretty much cool, and we only want the parallax effect in the x-axis, so that's why we have done these things. Or I guess we can make it a little bit small. So let's get out of play mode, we're gonna make it something like 0.1, and if we meet 0.1, sorry, we're gonna make 1, or let's put it 0 like that. I think 0 would be fine. Sorry, on I'm not gonna play around with its zone, so I'm gonna just uncheck that. And if we just go ahead and then click on this play button, basically to make it a little bit better, so I just uncheck this dead zone. You can play around with the dead zone, then screen position and all of these things, and you're gonna get it. I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. Now this seems pretty much cool, but the problem is that we can still able to notice our backgrounds, you can simply say. Basically we need to make our jump height a little bit down. So I will select my player game object in the hierarchy. Let's go over to inspector player script, and I'm gonna make the jump height something around 10. And if we play around now, this seems pretty much cool. I guess 10 is perfect number, so make sure you remember the jump height, which is 10. So now let's get out of play mode, and we're gonna paste it 10 instead of 14. And also what we will do, we're gonna drag it a little bit up our backgrounds. So I'm gonna move over to my background game object in the hierarchy. Let's select this PG1, and let's select the move tool from this scene view, and let's move it up. Or what we can simply do, we can just move over to inspector, then in the z-axis we can put a smaller number, so this background just gonna be close to our main camera. I hope, or we can just zoom in a little bit. You can do anything you like. I'm gonna drag my background a little bit high, something like this, and I'm gonna select my second background, let's drag it up, and now this seems pretty much cool. Or we can just put a square somewhere over here to just fill this area. But before we do it, let's click on this play button in the top in order to start our game. You can just put a white square and you can just make it size around or this hole, and you can just make that child of this background, the middle one, and it's gonna be cool. So as you can see, we still able to notice we can collect this coin by the way. So what I'm gonna do to basically to get rid of, I'm gonna get out of play mode, I'm gonna put a square. So firstly I will select this middle background, which is the this one. As you can see, let's right click on it. So I'm gonna right click on it. Let's go to 2D object, then sprites, and then we're gonna choose this square sprites, and then we're gonna choose this square, and let's move this square in the up direction, and we're gonna make this square as the size of our whole level. So let's make it something around 100. So let's go over to inspector, transform, scale, and we're gonna put it something like 100, and in the Y we're gonna do something like 10, and we're gonna move it a little bit up somewhere around here. And I just want this color of this background, the middle one. So we can move over to this sprite renderer component, then color, and then click on this picker tool, color picker tool, and we're gonna make the color of this. And now this seems pretty much fine. And once you're done, make sure you just go to parent cam object, then inspector, overrides, and then apply all. And I'm gonna drag my middle background a little bit down by now, something like this much. And in the Y I'm gonna put, sorry, I will move over to my inspector, then transform, and position in the Z axis I'm gonna make something like 3. And now this seems pretty much cool, and we can simply move over to overrides one more time and then apply all. And let's press down Ctrl S in order to save our project. But before I save, let's click on this play button, and it should work fine by now. Let's hope it's work fine. So you can just do whatever you want to do, just play around with the game engine and you're just gonna get all of those things. So now if I jump in the y-axis, as you can see, we're not able to notice our you can simply say the background. So this seems pretty much cool and making this lot of things great. So I'm gonna play around with the dead zone, you can simply say in the width. So I'm gonna move over to my Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, then move over to inspector, Cinemachine, position, composer, and I'm gonna check this dead zone. And in the Y I'm gonna put 0.1 as well. And now is, I guess it's pretty much cool. And if we just go ahead and then click on this play button in the top, it should work fine. Basically, let's take a look on this. I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. Or in this dead zone Y, you can put 0 as well if you do 1. So I think it's fine by now. So in this area we can see we can move, but the camera is not following. But once we surpass this area, camera started following our player. So basically that is the cool thing with the dead zone. You can just do it. So make sure you select your Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, then go over to inspector, then this Cinemachine position composer component in the bottom you can find, and you can check this dead zone, as well as you can put the target offset in the Y, and you can do in the X as well. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. To add camera shake, what we need to do, we need to do some setting our Cinemachine camera. So let's head over to this hierarchy and let's select this Cinemachine camera. Sorry, really apologize. So what we need to do, firstly we need to choose this Cinemachine camera, then go over to inspector, go over to inspector, then Cinemachine camera component. In the bottom you can see noise and it says none, so just click there and choose this basic multi-channel Perlin. And now as soon as we have chosen, we can see a Cinemachine basic multi-channel composer just added up. And what we need to do, basically this component just added, which is Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin component, not Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin composer. Basically this is Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin component, and over here we can see noise profile, and it says none. So we need to choose 60 sec for our shaking. To do that, in the right side you can see settings icon, so just click there and then go over to presets and then choose this 60 sec. And now we have chosen 60 sec, and if we go ahead and then click on this play button in the top in Unity editor in order to play our game, you will see right away the camera just gonna shake. As soon as our game just gonna start, our camera will just gonna shake right away. So let's have a look on this. So just wait a little moment, and once it's done you will see that. So as you can see, as soon as our game started, camera started shaking, and we can play around with this amplitude gain. So if we move over to Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin and play and make this amplitude gain to something around 3, as you can see the camera is shaking even more intensely. So what we need to do, we need to play around with this amplitude gain, and we can play around with the frequency as well. If we just increase, we can see the intensity of this. So I'm gonna set it back to 1, and if we set back this amplitude gain to 0, as you can see, as soon as we have set it to 0, camera just stops shaking. But once we set it to 2 or 1 or 3, camera just started shaking. So what we basically need to do, we basically need a reference of this Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin component. Basically we need this Cinemachine camera sorry, not component. Really sorry, I really apologize for this. So basically we need a reference of this Cinemachine camera. Then we're gonna move over to this Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin component, and then we're gonna set this amplitude gain to 0 or with some number, so camera just gonna start shaking. And we also gonna set back to 0. If we set back to 0, we can see camera just stop shaking. So we will get out of play mode. So in the start of the game we don't want shake. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna move over, we will select our Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy. Then let's move over to this Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin, and we will set this amplitude gain to 0 because we don't want shake in the start of the game. So that's why by default we set it to 0 in the start of the game. But we also need to set it to with some number, so we can make the shake. For it, we just gonna create a script. So we will head over to our project tab, assets, and then a script folder. Let's right click there, then create, then move over to scripting, and then click on this mono behavior script, and you can name that script to whatever you like. So I already created a camera shake script. You can name that script to something like camera shake or shake. It's basically up to you. And we can attach this script to any game object in our hierarchy. But for better, we're gonna select our Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, and we will choose our camera shake script and drag it over to this add component section in the inspector. Now we can see the camera is a shake script just attached, and now we can just open that up by double clicking on it. So what we need, firstly we need a reference of this Cinemachine camera. Then we can move over to this component, and we can set this amplitude gain to some number. So before we do, what we need to do, we need to move over to this top of our class, and we need to include this namespace. It's called using unity dot cinemachine. So make sure you include this namespace using unity.cinemachine. So it's gonna allow us in order to grab the reference of that Cinemachine camera. So firstly we need to reference. So we're gonna make a serialized field, private, and the component we're looking for is our Cinemachine camera. So we're gonna type this Cinemachine camera, and let's call it Cinemachine camera, or CCam. Let's call it CCam, or let's simply call it cam. For camera you can simply say. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So, because we need to grab the reference, so let's move over to Unity. So underneath our camera script, we should able to see a field just gonna pop up says cam. So what we need to do there, we basically need to select our Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, and we need to drag it over to that field. So we're gonna have the reference, then we can just shake our camera. Basically we can set that amplitude, gain, and that frequency. And we can see as soon as our camera shake script just compile, underneath our camera shake script we can see cam, and it said non Cinemachine camera. So we're gonna select our Cinemachine camera as from the hierarchy, and let's drag it there. Or you can simply select over here as well in the inspector, and you can just drag it over to this field. Now we can see we have the reference of this Cinemachine camera. Now we can move over to that component. So let's open up our script by double clicking on it, and we're gonna make a function in order to basically shake our camera. And we will make this function public, since we're gonna call this function from another class or another script. So that's why we're gonna mark this function as public. And for function we're gonna type void, and we have to name the function. So I'm gonna call it something like shake, and let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. What we have to do over here, so this shake over here, this function, it's gonna take a duration of that shake, as well as a second argument it's gonna take the intensity of that. So firstly I'm gonna pass a float, and this will be duration, let's call it duration. Second thing, comma, it's gonna take the intensity, that will also be a float. So we will type float variable, basically taking just argument, and we can call this one intensity, like that. And we can replace this number once we're gonna call this shake function. Then we're gonna replace this duration with some number, something like 0.1 amount of time, and also we're gonna replace this intensity with something like 2. So the camera just gonna shake. So if we set it to 2 amplitude gain as using, it's gonna shake. So what we need right now, so we just pass this variable, later on we can just set that. And also we're gonna make a variable for it in order to keep track of when we started shaking. So we will go to top of our class, and we're gonna make that field private. It doesn't need to be public, and we can call that one will be float, and we'll call that start shaking or start time. Let's call it start time, and let's close that up with semicolon. And now what we're gonna do over here, we will set start time equal to our duration, and let's close that up with semicolon. So let's suppose as a duration we pass something like 0.1. So this over here will be 0.1, this duration. So this start time just gonna be 0.1. Why? Because we're setting directly, as you can see, we're just setting start time equal to our duration. So this start time just gonna be 0.1 if we just replace this duration with 0.1. And let's suppose we set this duration to something like 1. So this duration right over here just gonna be 1. So this start time right over here will be 1. So basically we just created this variable to just keep track of when we started shaking our camera. So that's why we just created this, and we're gonna use this parameter later in order to stop shaking our camera. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna shake our camera. So basically we need to move over to that that you can simply say, if we move over to Unity, so we need to grab this Cinemachine basic multi-channel component. We need to grab it, and then we can set the amplitude gain. So firstly what we will do, we will go over to this Cinemachine camera, and by that we're gonna grab this reference. So firstly what we're gonna do, we're gonna move over to, I'm really apologize for this. So firstly we will go to cam. Basically we're just going over to Cinemachine camera, you can simply say, and then dot, we're gonna use this get component, and the component we're looking for is a basic multi-channel purlin. So we have to type, so we're gonna type this Cinemachine basic multi-channel purlin, then make this first bracket, and then close that up with semicolon. So basically we're just going over to this Cinemachine basic multi-channel purlin. Firstly we just moving over to this Cinemachine camera, and then we using get to get this Cinemachine basic multi-channel purlin. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna store this Cinemachine basic multi-channel purlin into another Cinemachine basic multi-channel purlin, basically to a container we're gonna store it. So and that will be type of Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin, since this component is Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin, and we can call this one something like Perlin. Let's call it Perlin, and let's set equal to this. Basically what we have done, we basically just moving over to this Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin, and we just taking this component and we storing that component into this Perlin variable, as you can see, and that type will be Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin, since this component is our Cinemachine basic multi-channel Perlin. Basically we simply taking this component and we storing into this Perlin, as you can see, or you can simply say that this is a container where we're storing. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna access this. We have the reference of this basic multi-channel Perlin, and now we can access this amplitude gain. So what we will do after putting into this Perlin component, we're gonna move over to to this Perlin container. So we're gonna move over to that, and now we're gonna access the amplitude gain. So we're gonna type this dot amplitude gain, and we're gonna set equal to our intensity, and let's close that up with semicolon. And let's suppose once you call this check function, and as an intensity you pass something like 2, so this intensity it's gonna be 2, means that amplitude gain. So we going over to that basic multi-channel Perlin component and then accessing the amplitude gain, and we setting equal to intensity. So we assume this intensity is 2, so this amplitude gain just gonna be 2. Basically means this right over here amplitude gain will be 2, and we do know once it's gonna be 2, the camera just gonna start shaking right away, and once we set back to 0, it's gonna stop shaking. So we also need to call this function, but when we're gonna call it, once enemy takes damage or enemy dies, we're gonna call it. But before we do, we need to save our script. Make sure you press down Ctrl S on your keyboard in order to save your script, and then move over to Unity, and we will open up our enemy script where enemy is taking damages. So in that moment we just want to shake our camera, so we basically need to call that function. So just wait a moment, and once it's done, we are ready to do that. So now it's done. So we will open up our enemy script by now. So let's double click on this enemy script from that script folder in our project tab, and let's move over to over here. Enemy is taking damage, so we need to call the shake function here. To call the shake function, so we can simply use, we're gonna do inside over here taking damage. So we have to use this find any object by type, and if you don't want to use this, then you can just use the singleton pattern. I will have a video in the description as of singleton pattern, and it just makes our code lot more clean. So you can just take out that video, I will have in the description. And find any object by type, and we need to pass this arrow, and inside this arrow we need to pass the script that we're looking for. So we're looking for that camera shake script. In there we created the shake function as you seen earlier. So we're gonna pass camera shake script and then make this first bracket. And now what we have to do, we basically need to call the function. So we're gonna type this dot, and the function we're looking for is shake. So we're gonna type this shake, and then make this first bracket and then close that up with semicolon. And we do know that this shake function, it's gonna take two argument. First it's gonna take the duration, with how much duration or the amount of time we just want to shake. So I want to shake something like 0.1f, 0.12f, something like that, a smaller number, comma. Second thing, it's gonna take the intensity, or you can simply say the amplitude gain as using. So basically what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pass something like 3f or 3 unit. So basically what we're doing, we're just going over to this camera shake script, as you can see right over here, and then calling this function. And what this function is really doing, firstly it's just setting a start duration. Basically we just pass duration with 0.12 as using. So the duration will be 0.12, and this intensity, as a intensity we pass 3. Basically means this amplitude gain right over here, it's gonna be 3, since we're just setting directly. Basically this over here, if I choose my Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, move over to inspector, Cinemachine basic multi-channel component, we can see that amplitude can will be our intensity, and as an intensity we pass 3, so this amplitude gain will be 3. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And now we need to save our anime script, so we will simply press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So as soon as our anime game object start taking damages, just gonna start taking damage from this player game object, you will see the camera just gonna shake right away. So just wait a moment. And as in duration we pass, which is 0.12f, and second argument we pass the amplitude gain, or you can simply say the intensity of it. So now what we're gonna do, so let's start our game. So I'm gonna click on this play button in the top in order to start our game, and let's have a look on it. So just wait a little moment, and let's shoot on this. So game started, and camera is not shaking as you can see. But if I shoot projectile and enemy takes damage, as you can see, camera just started shaking. But the problem is that camera is shaking forever. It's not shaking with that duration, because if I choose my Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, go over to inspector, Cinemachine basic multi-channel plugin, we can see amplitude gain we set it to 3, which was our intensity. So what we need to do, we also need to set back this amplitude gain to 0, so it's not gonna shake at all. So we also need to set back this amplitude gain to 0. So when we need to do it, once the duration is complete of that shake. So we will get out of play mode. For it, we will head over to our camera shake script, and as you can see, we created this start time to just keep track of when our you can simply say when our camera just started shaking. So that's why we created this variable to just keep track of when a camera just started shaking. And we just set it equal to our duration, and duration we set we just pass 1.12f as you saw earlier. So this start time just gonna be you can simply say 0.12. So we will move over to this update function, and we do know that update function runs every single frame. So over here we're gonna check, so we will check if, so let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And what we want to check over here, sorry, I really apologize. So what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if our start time is lesser than or equal to 0. If that is the case, then we're gonna stop shaking. So now for now let's print out a message. So debug.log, let's say something like stop shaking, something like that, and let's close that up with semicolon. Else our camera is shaking, sorry, else our start time, sorry, really apologize. And if our start time is not lesser than or equal to 0, we do know that once we're gonna start our shaking, this start time just gonna be as duration, and duration we pass 0.12. And we do know that this start time just gonna be 0.12. It's not gonna be lesser than or equal to 0. So in that moment, what we need to do, we need to subtract some amount from this start time, so it just gonna hit 0. And once it's 0, we just simply printing out a message for now, which is stop shaking. So else, let's suppose this start time is not 0, it's something like 0.12. So in that moment we need to subtract some amount from this start time until and unless it hits 0. So else, if our start time is not equal to 0, then we're gonna subtract minus equal time dot delta time, and we're doing inside this update function. And we do know that update function runs every single frame. So every single frame we just subtracting from this start time this minus time dot delta time, which is change in frame rate. So we do know that this start time some just gonna hit 0 once we subtracting every single frame. So so it's gonna hit 0. And once it hits 0, as you can see, we just stop we just printing out a message in the console says stop shaking. and we do know once we start our shake, this start time just gonna be a duration which we passed, I guess something like 0.12. So this start time not gonna be lesser than or equal to 0, it will be 0.12. So in that moment else we just subtracting, and until and unless it hits 0, then we just printing out this message, as you can see. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move over to Unity and let's have a look. So once our camera just gonna start shaking after few seconds, like 0.12, then that message just gonna pop up, says stop shaking, because the duration is over, the amount of intensity, the time that we want is over, so we need to stop shaking. So I'm gonna select my console tab, and let's click on this play button in the top in order to start our game, and let's take a look on this. So just wait a moment. So now if we stop shaking, sorry, so if I just set, as you can see, we just getting a message says stop shaking once it's basically just getting. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, we just get weird behavior. Basically what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna move over to my script, and we're gonna include this start function. So this start function get called in the start of the game. So start time by default I'm gonna set equal to some number, something like, let's set equal to something like 1 unit. So that message just gonna not gonna pop up at all, and until and unless if it says 0. So let's have a look. So let's go over to Unity and let's take a look on this. So once our start time hits 0, you will see the message in our console tab just gonna pop up, says stop shaking. So just wait a moment, and we're gonna click on this play button in the top in order to start our game. So once our start time just gonna hit 0, that message just gonna pop up in the console, says stop shaking. So let's have a look on this. So I'm gonna damage my enemy. So as you can see, as soon as it's taking damage, after a few seconds we can see the message just getting pop up, says stop shaking. Instead of doing this, we're gonna set the amplitude gain to 0. So if we select our Cinemachine camera in the hierarchy, go over to inspector, Cinemachine basic multi-channel per lane component, we can see amplitude gain is 3. So we need to set back to 0, and if we set back to 0, as you can see, it just stops shaking. So let's get out of play mode, and we're gonna double click on this message in order to move over to that line of code. Instead of printing out message, we just want to set we want to set our basic multi-channel basically amplitude gain to 0. So I'm gonna copy this line of code by Control C, and let's paste it over here. Instead of printing out message, we're gonna do this. So firstly what we're doing, we're just going over to let's set this amplitude gain first to 0. So we're gonna set equal to 0. So firstly we just taking our basic multi-channel per lane, as you can see, going over to Cinemachine camera cam.get component, and we getting this Cinemachine basic multi-channel per lane component, and then we just taking taking this component, which is Cinemachine basic multi-channel per lane component, and we storing into this per lane Cinemachine basic multi-channel per lane container, as you can see. And after doing that, we just accessing the amplitude gain by going over to that component, and we setting equal to 0, as you can see. So I hope you get the idea. Now if we set amplitude gain to 0, we do know that the camera just gonna stop shaking right away once we set this amplitude gain to 0. And now I'm gonna press down Ctrl S to save my script, and I'm gonna clean a bit, and let's do this here, and I guess it's fine now. And let's press down Ctrl S to save our script, and we're gonna move over to Unity, and let's have a look on this. So we should able to notice that once our duration is over, basically start time is 0, you will see the camera just gonna stop shaking since we setting our amplitude gain to 0. So now let's have a look on this. So just wait a little moment. Once it's done, we are ready to check that out. So wait a moment. So now if we go ahead and then click on this play button, it's gonna work fine. But once our enemy just gonna take damage, camera just gonna shake, and once our start time hits 0, the camera will stop shaking. We simply setting amplitude gain to back to 0. So now if I just shake, as you can see, something 0.12 f a second just camera is shaking, and once our duration once our start time is 0, it's basically 0, the camera just stops shaking, as you can notice. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, and the game looks pretty much cool, and we can do with this one as well, and this seems pretty much cool. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, and we need to fill out these graphs, I guess. So we need to work on those as well, and this pretty much good game, you can simply say. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, how you can do these things. And if you just want to work out with singleton pattern to make your code a little bit clean, of course I will have a video in the description. You can check that out on singleton pattern. Also Brackets already has a video, also I'm gonna give a link in the description. You can check that out. So I hope you get the idea that how you can shake your camera. Let's build up our game, but before we do it, I will have some assignment for you. Basically make this game from scratch and upload it to itch.io and share the link with me on Discord. You can share that as well. So you can share the link so I can play, and I can give some advices or some instruction, you can simply say. So you can check that out. I will have a video in the description, or I recommend my Udemy courses where I have taught everything from scratch and there is no ads interruption. So you can take those courses as well. So and by buying those courses, you can help me so much. You can do that. It's basically up to you if you do one, or if you just want to check out a free video. Of course I will have a video link in the description. You can check that out how you can upload your game on itch.io, and once you upload, share the link with me on Discord. You can share the link with me Discord, so I can just play that game, and I can give some advice or something like that. So I hope you get the idea. So now let's build up our game. To build up our game, we will head over to top left file in Unity editor, then build profiles, and over here make sure all of the scenes is right over here. If it's not, you need to move over to your project tab, assets, and then scenes folder, and select all of those scenes and drag it over to this scene list. Firstly, you need to click on this open scene list, and then you can just drag all of the scenes one by one. Make sure menu is you just drag the menu scene in the top of all of these scenes. I hope you get the idea. And once you're done, you can just select this windows in the left bar once again, and we need to do some settings before we make our game. So in the top part you can see player settings, so just click there, and we're gonna do some setting. Firstly, company name, it will be something else like default company. Just remove that and name it something you like with your studio, or whatever. So in my case I just name it as the name of my YouTube channel, and the product name I have given Juicy Jam. You can give it something like platformer jump or anything like that. Make sure you just do it. And if you have an icon, then you can drag it over here, or you can simply click on it in order to select an icon. So let's I'm gonna choose this icon, like that, or we can choose this one as well. So I'm gonna choose this one, and resolution, then move over to this resolution and presentation. It's gonna be full screen window, so just leave like that, or you can choose window as well. And I just take this resizable windows, so I'm gonna leave it like that. And once we done, or you can just simply skip this part, resolution and presentation, and we will move over to next setting, which is splash image. So if we click on this preview, as you can see, it's loading up. So let's suppose you do want your Unity logo, so make sure this show Unity logo is checked, and if you just click on this preview, as you can see, the Unity logo in the bottom and my logo in the top. And if you don't want Unity logo and you just want your custom logo, then make sure you click on this plus icon, then drag the logo that you want right over here. And also you can play around with the background color. And if we sorry, if you don't want Unity logo, then you can just uncheck it. And if we click on this preview, by now we can see Unity logo is removed. By the way, it's removed. It's removed, and I hope you get the idea. So now we can move over to next settings, which is other settings, and we don't have to do anything right over here. So we can simply skip this part, and we are ready to build our game. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cut this tab, and let's choose our profile tabs. In the top right, you can see build and run. So I'm gonna click there. I'm gonna click there, and make sure you click make sure you just make a separate folder for your build. Basically, right click, then new folder, and you can name that folder to something like build, or you can simply call it PC build as well. I already created a build folder, as you can notice right over here. So I'm gonna choose that folder, and let's click on this select folder. And as soon as we clicked on select folder, now Unity just gonna prepare our build, and once it's done, we are ready to play our game. We can just play our game right away. And make sure those are assignments. Basically, you need to do something. You basically have to make a game simple, and you can just share the link with me in Discord, and the Discord link available in my YouTube channel about section, so you can check that out. And if you do want the source code of it, then you can check out my Patreon membership and take my membership, because there is a lot of benefits you gonna get. Some courses will be free if you take membership, so make sure you just do it, and it will also just gonna help me a lot as well. But it's totally up to you what you want. It doesn't need to be, but if you want to support me, you can do so on Patreon, as well as through YouTube membership. But I prefer a Patreon over YouTube membership, since there you can get all of the source codes in Patreon, so that's why. And also some amazing courses will be available for free if you take membership of you can check that out. I will have in the description, you can check that out. So I hope you get the idea that how we can just create this, and it should be fine by now. So just wait a little moment. It's gonna take around 1 to 5 minutes between that amount of time. And if you do have a fast system, so in your case it's gonna be done within 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Within 2 seconds you can just get it done. So just wait. So just wait a moment, and the build is now finished, and we can just go ahead and we can play our game. So just wait a moment. As you can see, my logo just loaded up, and we're gonna have it. Sorry. I'm gonna down my music a little bit. Sorry, I'm gonna down it something like this. And if we go ahead and then click on this play button, as you can see, we can play our game and we can make the double jump, as you can notice. So this seems pretty much cool. We have dash effect and we can now shoot out the projectiles, and this seems pretty much cool, as you can notice. Wow, this is really a great game. And we can collect these coins, and if we die, we can just moving over to game over screen, as you can see. And I'm gonna click on this menu, and let's click on this exit button. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And I will see you in the next tutorial. So bye for now, and I will see you in the next tutorial.